All right. All right. All right. Shall we start it now? Here we
Yeah. Who's Jason today?
go. I'll pretend to be Jason. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of. Okay. I don't think that's what Jason sounds like. Uh,
Is that
fuck.
Bert or Ernie?
I
Was
don't
were we
know.
going for the Bert and Ernie?
I don't know. Do you want me to sound like Jason? Hi. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Verbal Laxative today. I'm Jason. And then it goes
And
in a circle.
yeah. Well, my name is this is Brian, and we have a intimate two-man show today.
Yeah, in case anybody didn't pick up, I'm not actually Jason. It's Sinzin and it's Brian. And yes, we have a two-man episode today. A
Going with it,
man's episode. Man-episode. Two-man
going with
episode.
a less professional intro, kind of doing a cold take. That's how.
This is more like a intimate intro. Uh, a hanging out, chill introduction.
You know, in some podcasts, I feel like when they run out of content, they just do viewers' questions. They're like,
Oh,
let's take
yeah?
some questions from the viewer, kind of thing, or the listeners.
Well, you know what? It's a it's a good way to fill up time actually. And then,
Yeah.
but the thing is you need actually like viewers to actually start.
Oh, you know
Um
what's another good cop out way
yeah.
is recaps. So like, let's do the highlights of our season, and then you just show like segments of old episodes.
Yeah, oh fuck, I hate those. I hated those so much. And then it'll be like, yeah, not even flashback, yeah, recap episodes. But
Yeah,
then during the episode there'll be like a couple minutes of like actual story where they're,
yeah,
like, oh, like like in Friends it'd be whoever, like Joey moving out or something, but then the entire
hmm
episode will be spliced of all these memories that they did the
memories. Yeah.
before. But
Well,
then you're
they
still
always.
watching it because
Yeah,
it's him moving. You're like, oh, what's happening? And like, there's all
yeah.
this cheap ass like 20 minutes worth of just recaps.
Well,
I hated them.
Christmas is always the time for those because like Christmas episodes, they always do recap because usually end of the season kind of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, Simpsons, I think they used to do that. I don't know if they still do it anymore, but they used to have
No,
a
The
lot of the
Simpsons
best
usually.
ofs.
Well, I guess so. I'm trying to think about the Christmas. I haven't watched that for a long time, but they would always have some kind of specials like the Christmas specials and especially the Halloween specials, right? They were really big on
Hmm.
that.
Well, the Halloweens are great. The Treehouse of Horrors,
Yeah,
those
but
are
they would have.
fantastic.
It wouldn't like. I guess they would do recaps, but I don't know. Like, well, it wouldn't make sense for them to always do recaps unless what everybody's
No,
like
I
going on
think,
vacation, right? 'Cause it doesn't take that much
yeah.
for them to make an episode as much as it took Friends. Like everybody got paid $1 million an episode.
I think recaps made sense in a time when shows were on TV and they were episodic. I don't think they
Yeah,
make sense anymore when they're on demand. Like it would not, people would not watch that or they would be pissed.
yeah. I mean, you know what? I don't even. I just felt like it was just like a cost saving filler fucking thing. That's why they would have recaps.
Yeah. Like
There's no other
the
point
the
why you
anime
would
I
have that.
watched as a kid, Gundam Wing. I think two of the episodes were recaps, where they recap like season one in
Yeah,
preparation for the season two.
but that would be stupid because don't they have like a set amount of episodes that they say they're gonna do, right? So
Yeah,
then you're basically filling up episodes that you already were set aside for the entire show that you
yeah,
planned out,
exactly.
and you have a recap, even that for a show that you've already planned out.
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of dumb if you think about it. And like you said, there's little clips that were integral to the show, but like you were just filled with most of it. It's just damn recaps. It was just
Yeah,
annoying.
so you couldn't exactly skip it because you may want to know what the hell's going on in those like small minutes that is new stuff.
Yep.
But then it's just, yeah, it's terrible. It should be a crime. That's what it should be.
Actually, another show I watched was called Legion, and it's like an X-Men TV show. Not many
Uh,
people have heard of it. It's about a guy named he's the son of Xavier.
yeah.
His name is David, and in season one, like season one ends, but then at the last episode of season one, there's like this after the credits, there's this hidden like credit scene,
Uh-huh.
and that was integral to the beginning of season two. So if you had missed that scene and you went to watching season two, you would have no idea what happened. Like, because what happened was David gets captured and he's gone missing. So when you start season two, you're like he comes back from being missing, and you would if you didn't see that secret clip, you would be like, when was he missing? It's really jarring. I didn't know that because I totally just turned it off when the credits came, and so when I started season two, I was lost.
That's kind of what. Yeah, if everything hinges on the post-credit scene, that's kind of dumb. Why would
Yeah, it's kind of like yeah, we were expecting you, but I don't know when
they
that
were,
trend happened. But
they
Marvel
really
kind of
wanted you
started that
to
though.
they really wanted you to go through the credits just to make sure you read the names of everyone that was involved in the show.
They did, and I think Marvel did that, right? Because back then, before Avengers, remember how they had all these post-credit scenes to do these Marvel to hype you about the Avengers,
Yeah,
right? And then
yeah,
post-credit became a thing. Everyone's like, "Oh, we gotta stay for the post-credit scene,"
yeah.
and
The
you're just like,
post-credit, yeah. Just everybody loved the novelty of that shit,
"Yeah."
right?
Oh man, for years I was just like, "Fuck, you can just see this online. Let's just leave," right? I was just so pissed about it. And then you never know which post credit you're supposed to watch because there's always like
Yeah.
a legit one, and then after that there's like a funny one. I don't know. I think they were just going too
Well,
far
no, the
with it.
worst would be like for a bunch of other movies. Now you don't know because some other movies started copying that and had a post-credit scene. So then after you're watching just whatever movie, you're like, wait, do you think this movie will have a post-credit scene? So
Yeah.
you're just sitting there like a dick, just watching the whole
Oh
credit
man.
scene.
And if you're an employee for cinema, right, you'd be like, "Fuck, we can't even start cleaning because these people are just watching. Should we
Yeah,
just tell them there's no post credit scene? Like, you
yeah.
guys can leave, you know?" Oh
It's
man.
if they really wanted everybody to just, and if they really wanted everybody just to read the names of everybody that was on the movie, then fucking, you know what? They would just think about something like showing it right at the start of the movie or something like that.
Well, they usually do. They usually show actors. They usually show directors' names.
Yeah, the
But it's
important
usually
people. They won't show all the other the I guess the non-important people that took
well,
part in it.
I guess it depends on what you consider as important because in a movie there is a lot of people that go into it, right? There's animation, there's editors, there's graphic designers, like a
I
whole
think
slew of things.
they would just feel better if they just got paid more instead of, just having a name on the
Yeah.
credit, I guess.
Well, I do feel like it's kind of annoying that when someone says this is a bad movie because of an actor couldn't act or a director couldn't direct or a writer was bad, I felt like it kind of discredited a lot of the people who worked on the movie, right? Because, you know, it shouldn't be on one single person why a movie failed. It's a huge project, so I feel like even success too. It's not like one person made this movie successful. I feel like a lot of people did.
Yeah, but like at the end, you're only as strong as your weakest, whatever member, right?
Right.
So you could have a really awesome stunt coordinator and stunt man, and maybe some good special
But then,
effects team, but
okay.
then the
Hmm.
director and the writer just completely blotch, and your actors are like just fucking idiots. They're and the movie's not gonna be good when it comes out, no matter how good the rest of the cast was.
Yeah, right. Well, even that saying, you're only as strong as your weakest member. If that was the case, why don't we recognize the weakest member in our company? We always talk about the best of the best, right?
Then kill him.
You're like, we would never have gotten here if our weakest member didn't do as well.
just just take your like company just take your company policies straight out of like Mein Kampf or something.
Yeah. Like, can you imagine, like, what do you call those? Um, like a tournament. I'm thinking of like a tournament, like say the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
And let's say it's like fencing or something, and the way you win instead of like say you have three members on each team, and each member needs to get a win for you
Yeah.
to win to win against the other team.
Yeah.
So then you could basically create a strategy where like, okay, we don't need to beat all the best player, we just need to beat the weakest kind of thing, right? And I think that would be hilarious
But
because then that would totally like go with what you're saying, where you're only as strong as your weakest member, and if everyone needs to win, then if the weakest player can't win, then basically your team is out.
Yeah. But I don't think people want. Yeah, okay, sure. You know what? Let's just. You know what? Just start something like this. I'll watch it. Don't worry.
Then it'll be an interesting dynamic rather than figuring out this whole like they will rather than just focusing on the strongest athlete, they would have to focus on the weakest to make sure there's no.
I was just about to say, man, sounds fucking stupid. But you know what? You know what? Let's see this. Let's see this happen first.
Well, there's a game. There's a game came out called Fantasy Strike, and it was designed by a board game designer, I guess.
Okay.
And he made a video game, a fighting game based on a board game that he made, which was based on the fighting game. It's kind of
that's kind of odd. Yeah. Okay. Keep on going.
So he liked fighting games, so he made a board game to emulate fighting games.
Yeah.
But then it kind of worked, but it also kind of didn't work because in fighting games, it's kind of like you have all the buttons available to you, right? You can do light punch, you can do heavy punch, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But in the board game, you need those cards to do those moves. So if like the move to keep you alive was to do a light punch, but you didn't have it in your hand, it's like almost like your controller broke at that moment and you couldn't press that button. So anyways, so the board game didn't work. So then he made a fighting game, like a digital fighting game based on his own board game that he made.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, in that fighting game, he did that rule set where you pick 3 characters and you have to win with all 3 or you basically lose the match.
I see. So you can't get like a fucking scrub character.
Yeah, you have.
Because that guy will lose you the game. Is that what?
Yeah, exactly. Because like, so you have 3 characters, then your opponent has 3 characters, then they'll battle them out, and when you win with the character, you no longer can select them, and so then the character you haven't won with, you're stuck with them, and then the opponent will just keep fighting against you until they win with all their characters. So if you're not good with all 3 of your characters, you basically can't win any matches. Is what is happening.
Okay, so it's not like Marvel vs. Capcom where you can just get one guy that can kill all 3 other guys on the other guy's team.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Just do an infinite combo, right? You got
exactly.
All 3 of your guys have to at least win. Or like contribute. Okay, I see.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in Marvel Capcom 3, there's a strategy where you give up the first 2 characters and you just what do you call it? Put all your eggs in one basket. And that team was called Dark Phoenix. So there's a team where your goal is just to get Dark Phoenix. And so you would sacrifice your first 2 character and build her up, and then you would get Dark Phoenix. And Dark Phoenix will just wreck the other team.
Because Dark Phoenix, I don't play it. I don't play it, so I don't know what the hell's going on. But Dark Phoenix doesn't like just come out straight off the bat. You have to get like Jean Grey to become Dark Phoenix. Is that what's going on?
That's right. Yeah, so Jean Grey has like super low life. She dies in one combo, and she's very fragile. But the way is that you need to build super meter, and when you have 5 meters, and when she dies, she turns into Dark Phoenix. So the goal is to use the first 2 characters to build her meter, and so when the first 2 die, you basically at that point you should have enough meter that when Jean Grey dies, she becomes Dark Phoenix.
Wow.
And then you would just
Marvel vs. Capcom strategy for people. I mean, because I was thinking the whole time, like, why the fuck would you sacrifice all the other 2 characters you have? Why not just have a go at it and try to win with it at least?
Yeah.
And then, but this makes sense. Yeah, you need to sacrifice the other 2 characters.
It was kind of like even in Dragon Ball. Remember, they just sacrifice their energy to Spirit Bomb, and then Goku just tosses that Frieza.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if that, in Dragon Ball, if the situation was like, oh, these other characters can just win the fight, I'm pretty sure they would win the fight, just without sacrificing their life force for like the Spirit Bomb. It's because they couldn't. This is supposed to be like the Hail Mary or whatever, right? You give your leftover strength to that stupid fucking ball.
I always thought Goku was such a hilarious character because there was a season where they fight the android. And they're like, okay, I came from the future to tell you about these evil robots, the androids. Yeah. We could stop them from coming. And Goku's like, nah, let's fight with them. I want to see how strong they can be, right? Like Goku's whole premise is he just wants to fight stronger people, and he would jeopardize the world just to do that. And then he fights them.
That was kind of like the instinct of all the Saiyans, though. Like Vegeta wanted to keep on fighting stronger people as well. It was
Yeah,
like a
but Vegeta also was. But Vegeta would also like, oh, if I could shoot Frieza in the back, I would kill him and not face him directly, right?
okay, but he was also, but sure, like he would take all the advantages offered to him to
Hmm.
defeat his opponent. But his whole thing shtick was he wanted to fight like stronger and stronger opponents and shit.
Not the same level as Goku, because Goku would totally let Cell power up and get ready before he fights
But
with
that's
them. He
exactly
wouldn't
what
like,
Vegeta did to Cell, right? Remember, when Vegeta was fighting Cell, Cell wasn't
right?
complete yet, and Vegeta was kicking his ass. And then
Oh,
Cell's
you're
like,
right, you're
"Yeah,
right.
right? And then he
He,
did exactly that. He's like, fine, I'll let you become like full Cell, like complete your form. Yeah, I'll let
oh,
you
you're
do
right.
that, and then we'll
He
fight.
even, yeah, he gave him 18, I think, maybe. Yeah, you might be right about
Yeah, man.
that. Okay, those two, but yeah, I guess it's kind of weird
Case
that
closed.
they're both those two protagonists was kind of strange then.
No, it's not
Uh,
strange. Their race, their Saiyan instinct was to fight stronger people. Just to fight. They live to fight.
yeah, I do think Goku is a pretty weak protagonist though in the Dragon Ball Z realm. Like his character arc was not very interesting compared to Vegeta. Vegeta, I think, was more of a interesting character compared to Goku.
But yeah, I think, yeah, you know what? Dragon Ball is just a very vulgar attempt at trying to tell the immigrant story. That's what they're trying to do.
Was it the immigrant story?
Vegeta, Goku was like a full immigrant from the planet whatever, planet Vegeta. That's what their planet was
Planet
called, right?
Vegeta. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. He comes, he's a refugee. He comes in and learns the way of Earth life and the Earth culture and grows up here. Vegeta is straight up, fresh off the boat from planet Vegeta. And then the contradictions are like manifested in each other's like conflict with each other. The old country versus the immigrant.
I suppose you could see it that way.
No, I'm just bullshit. I don't. I'm pulling this out of my ass.
But yeah, it's kind of like that.
My hot
Um,
takes are usually lukewarm when it comes to this.
anything on your mind? Any shows? Anything?
Well, yeah, let's get on. Well, shows. Nothing much. This is just pretty much just fucking small talk for how
All right,
many?
to the meat of
17
things, I
minutes. The
suppose.
meat of things. Well, I didn't really get anything planned today, but you know what kind of person I am and what I like to talk about.
Yeah,
You know,
economics. I
no, you're making me sound like a fucking nerd. I don't, I don't like to talk about economics just for the sake of fucking numbers and shit. I
right.
like to, but anyways, let's just go into this because last episode you said that you had a plan for being famous on TikTok. Well,
Yeah,
if the
Trump is
current
trying to get rid of it.
yeah, the current things go through, you'll have no way of getting famous with your plan anymore.
um, it's interesting because I felt like TikTok is an app that could rival against the Facebook and the YouTube, right? So it's kind of like anti-competition the way Trump is doing it in a sense.
I think that's also one of the reasons why they're trying to get Microsoft to buy out the TikTok, right?
Wait, Trump is not trying to get Microsoft, is it? I think that
No,
was
well, no, Trump was well. The whole sequence of events is like they want to ban TikTok just because they feel like it's a dangerous Chinese app, right?
yes,
And then
correct.
and then whether or not it's related or directly related or not, Microsoft got into talks with buying TikTok, and then Trump's
Yes.
administration said, "Okay, well, if Microsoft buys TikTok, then it won't be banned." That's what they're
But then
saying.
I thought the news I don't know, like Fox interviewed a guy and that guy who works for Trump's admin
Yeah,
was complaining about Microsoft saying like Microsoft helped develop China's firewall and China's system is on the backbone of Microsoft and
yeah. This is
he was
fucking.
saying that Microsoft is in the white hat
I don't
company, I
know. I
guess.
don't know who that was, but it sounds like a fucking quack. And but yeah, like it's all in news stories where like it's sort of strong arming TikTok to kind of say, oh, well, if you don't want to get banned, you will have to um, almost be like fucking coerced into being bought out by Microsoft if you wanna. if you don't want
Kind of
to
makes
attract the
sense.
ire.
Yeah.
But I mean, like if anybody had any illusions that like in the U.S. They would allow you to like this complete competition and free exchange of ideas and new things and whatever the fuck, and if people thought, oh, the US won't ever ban stuff like like China bans stuff, like this is pretty much flies this is very pretty much egg on the faces of those people, you know
Hmm.
at this point. Like you can't with a straight face say like, oh yeah, like America's always open to all this stuff. No, they're not. They're just the same as every other country, or when they feel threatened, they're gonna start to do stuff like this.
Yep. Yeah. People need to. Yeah, that's an illusion when you think that anything is safe. I guess there's
Anything is
always going to be a
open and
conflict.
safe, and yeah,
Yeah.
and definitely this is something like that. Because if you think about it, this is the dumbest thing. Like what if you like it's all gonna be under the aegis of like national security things, right? But if you think about it, like what the fuck can you compromise with TikTok? Like what is so important to the country's national security that you need to be in control of the video service sharing platform where like fucking teenagers go on and do dances and shit, right?
It's the thoughts, man. The
But they
thoughts
do.
are
They
the.
take it serious. Yeah, they take it serious. Yeah, the thoughts go on for like 15-second clips of them like dancing and shit. And then the US government just has a heart attack cuz they even banned like military people from downloading the app on their phones. I don't
Right.
know whether they're personal phones or their actual like, whatever government issue phones. They're banned from doing that. You can't make like little 10-second clips of you dancing if if you're
That's
a military man.
wait. Oh, okay. On a side note, did you hear about Twitch and the military? How they were.
Yeah, I've I've heard a bunch of stuff like what you said last time when the U.S. Army was basically gonna have their own like gaming fucking team, right? And
Mhm. They were
and
using
and
it to recruit people.
yeah, and they're using Twitch and shit to recruit people, which is
Yeah.
fucking hilarious as shit.
Like, what are these the candidates you want though? Like these like overweight gaming nerds?
I don't
They
think they
like.
have the choice anymore because they're. I think this is like what they can do before like just saying, you know what, fuck it, we have to start drafting people because we're not getting enough people.
Right.
Like, 'cause you go back to the draft like they had in Vietnam, where like draw the lottery on your birthday. Everybody on that birthday that gets drawn, oh, you're in the army now.
But like when you think of the army, isn't it based on supply and demand? And first of all, like, is there demand for more militants?
No, the
Like, we're
army is
not.
not. The army is not like a market entity, though. That's why it's not run for profit. So it's not by really supply and demand. It's
Hmm.
just like, okay, like you gotta you just need bodies to go there, right? You need to attract people that either want to go there or you force them to go there, right?
Hmm.
Um, and obviously, I think less and less people want to join the army.
Yeah,
You know,
I don't see the incentive other than the incentive that the military get you in by paying for school or paying for your living
oh,
or
they give you yeah, they
whatever.
give you a lot of incentives to join the military. And most of it is material incentives to join the military. And
Most
I
of it
think
is material, yeah.
yeah, most of it, and and still the numbers are declining, right?
Would it make sense if the military were to join forces with the Catholic Church and make it a spiritual incentive
You know,
that way?
it'll be funny if they do because that's what it was like back then during the Crusades, right? The church
Hmm.
and the army, like the various like bannermen and feudal lords of Europe and their knights that they would be their retainers. They acted like that. They were like the military arm of the church. So when the church was like saying, oh, we need to take back Jerusalem from the Muslims,
Hmm.
they in the name of God and in the name of the church, you would go, you would send your people there and stuff. And then uh, I was uh I was reading a little bit about European history the other day. It's funny because back then it was way more of a racket than it was now. I mean, like the church and religious business. So when they were building like St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, where like that's the big complex where, which is like the center of the Catholic faith, right, and where the Pope gives all his pronouncements or whatever, right? It's the Pope's seat of power, I guess, in Catholicism. But when it was getting constructed, basically it was almost like bonus incentives, and people were saying if you donate your money to the construction of this, you're basically buying any members that you have, any family members that died and you believe them to be in purgatory, or or they weren't as good a Christian in life that you believe that they're not reaching heaven. You buy, you donate money to the construction of this, then this guarantees that one of your family members will reach heaven. Like you're gonna buy their way into heaven by
So,
by giving money to the church to build this thing.
if I were to relate it to ordinary people, it'd be a get out free jail card in Monopoly.
No, because they're dead already, right? You yourself. It's not even like you're going to jail. It's like your dead family members. Hey, you want to see them? You want to make sure that they're in heaven?
Yeah.
here's
Okay.
here's a brochure.
Or a ticket, I guess. It's a one-way ticket
Well,
to heaven.
here's a brochure, and it's like, oh, maybe you get a premium package. You like, do you have a whole family that died? From the plague. Like, well, the silver package is by one family member only, but premium package, you donate this amount.
I asked this
The
about
entire family. The entire family goes to heaven.
I did ask this about my friend who's in business. I asked him like, could you sell something you don't believe in? And
yeah.
this is something like that. Like, can you imagine like, say you don't believe in God, but you're like selling these packages to build a church? Like, oh yeah, we can get your whole family out of purgatory if you buy this, if you invest this amount. Like my friend said, he couldn't do it. He feels bad when he sells something that he doesn't believe in.
Uh-huh.
Like he told me a story where he's a sweater and it
Okay.
had holes in it, and he
Okay.
sold it to like a disabled woman, and he felt really bad for it. But apparently he couldn't. I thought
He
that was
couldn't. So
interesting.
he told the woman, no, you shouldn't buy this sweater.
Well, in a way he did, but he also did tell he did. I did say like, well, she could return it if she didn't like it, and he's like, oh yeah, we have like 100% return policy or whatever. So, but he also felt that. But he did sound genuine when he said he wouldn't be able to sell something that he didn't believe in, because I was pitching him ideas about selling things to protect you from 5G, because 5G is the new hotness and it causes COVID, right? So if we could create a company that sells stuff to protect you from 5G and COVID, you can make a lot.
Yeah, if you don't like fucking go to jail for whatever.
What would you go to jail for?
Scamming, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose it's not. Is it fraudulent?
It
I don't
probably
know.
would be.
How does that? Who's that girl who sells her own pee? Or
Yeah, but no, in this case,
Gwyneth Paltrow? How does Gwyneth Paltrow
I
not
don't know.
get
Like,
charged for
I
fraud?
I think it's I guess if you're not harming anybody. But I don't know, even like you're taking their money though, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, you're
Like,
taking the money.
but you see, if I was just gonna work it out, I think the shit that Gwyneth Paltrow makes is just her fans. Fucking like, there's no. I don't even know, honestly. I don't.
Or
Maybe
like,
she's just rich. She's just rich. She can give away
or
with.
like tarot card reading. People who predict your talking to the dead, and
Yeah.
or like the hands of Jesus will compel you. That guy.
Well, I mean, like, I think as fucked up as they are, and it's not anything real, people are still buying exactly what they're buying for, which would be a tarot card reading, or if it's
Mm-hmm.
Gwyneth Paltrow's stuff, like the vagina ball that you put inside yourself.
Yeah.
They're buying it for the vagina ball that you put inside yourself, right?
Right.
It's not like I don't think she'll market it as like a contraceptive, but she just markets it as this nice thing that you can shove in your snatch, right?
It's all in the wording, I guess. Like,
Yeah, like it's basically saying what her stuff. I imagine it's something like saying, "Oh yeah, it's good for your fucking energies or
yeah.
whatever the fuck," right?
And the product I would sell, I wouldn't say it would prevent you from getting COVID. I would just say, it'll protect you from 5G, which
You would probably get fucking snagged because COVID has killed like how many people now? It's not something as light and breezy as, hey, this is your chi, and they'll open up your chakras and shove this ball in your ass. No, this one is like, hey, you remember that thing that's killed a bunch of people and shut down the entire activities of every country around the globe. Yeah, well, I'm gonna try to sell you something.
I don't know. I heard about the whole ball thing in your vagina wasn't that great for you either.
Well,
But
no shit.
that's another story somehow. But
Anytime you have to
anyways,
insert a ball into a snatch, I don't think it's gonna solve much of anything.
I would totally, if I could get rich, I would totally sell those packages to build that cathedral or
But you
whatever the
see,
Pope is looking for.
man, you see, like, I don't know, because it's hard to tell whether they were knowingly doing it as like a. Well, obviously they knew that. Yeah, well, we're just gonna fucking scam these people out of a bunch of money. But like the church itself back then was such a big deal that it was a strong belief by all these people. I wouldn't be surprised if like the bishop or whoever that was in charge of the whole fucking pyramid scheme really thought that, hey, since they're giving money to us, we would have the authority to say that they would go to heaven and whatnot. I think some of them would believe in the scam. At least I
Hmm.
would believe a substantial portion of them would believe in the scam.
Hmm. Yeah. See, I don't know. It's difficult with religion, I guess, because
I
yeah,
was I was talking with Lena the other day, and then she was it was a sort of like a, I guess it was sort of a more political talk, and she was kind of like not getting why some of these people were so adamant, especially like politicians or like like
about.
commentators when they
Hmm.
would talk about there's a certain defined set of values, whether it's like human rights or like democratic rights or just the stuff that you usually see in the country we live in and a lot of Western countries, right? Like these are unalienable rights. These are universal rights of whatever.
Hmm.
Um, she was kind of feeling like like why do these people feel like this is the only way, this is the way and the only way, and um they don't let much room for anything else to be in there. It's a really um they just created like a dichotomy. It's either good or bad, right?
Hmm.
Based on these things. And I was saying to her, it was like, you know what? I honestly believe that it's just these countries, they haven't gone away from their character when they were, like when instead of these things like democracy or the vote or freedom and all that stuff, before that it was like God and stuff. It was like God
Hmm.
and Christendom and like the whole faith, right? And
Hmm.
to the point where they would before they would wage war against all these other people that weren't of the faith, and then
Hmm.
after it turned into like missionaries that are sent by the church everywhere to convert people to the one, like
Hmm.
to God or whatever, so to
Missionary, I
speak.
feel like, they call it conversion, but it's almost like, we sent this guy, and if he can't convert enough people, we're just gonna escalate by the Crusaders, right? Like they're
Right.
the
Yeah, like if they're not these
they're just the
barbarians. There's
agents.
no
Like,
redemption for them, right?
yeah, they're
But
just the agents. It's like, hey, we asked you nicely with our missionaries. You didn't convert. We're just gonna swoop in now.
what I kind of said was like, I think the way I look at it, my hot take was on the whole thing was this is the new religion. They never grew out of this monotheist way of thinking as in aggregate for the entire people, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
you get some stragglers, but the mainstream, the main body politic will always think like that. Back then, it was the Pope at the top that would, be the closest to God, and on everything coming down from that, right? Like they truly, honestly believed in that. And if you didn't believe in the Christian faith, like you're a barbarian heathen that needs to be converted or either forcefully or willingly, right?
Hmm.
Now, instead of the words like God, Christianity, heaven, and all that stuff, all you do is replace it with uh, democratic, free
Hmm.
market, capitalism, or something like that. This is literally the same thing. Like if you look at it now, the same countries are saying the same rhetoric about the
Hmm.
same exact stuff, just with new words now, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
oh, why'd you topple this country? Oh, they weren't democratic. Or why'd you topple this country? Oh, because it's for freedom.
Yeah.
This is right. And especially during the Cold War, the other side that was the almost near equal, the socialist, the USSR led powers, they were definitely
It was
the definition of heathen to the rest of the world. Like,
well, it wasn't socialist. Wasn't it more communist? That's what they were.
no. We've already been through this.
Oh, okay.
The communism has never been realized. Has never been has never come into reality yet.
No,
Communism
no, I
is like,
understand that, but like during that time, during the Cold War, weren't they painting the
yeah, of
USSR's
course,
communism
yeah.
as the dark?
Communism, socialism, like it's intertwined. The for them is the intertwined for
Oh,
them.
okay.
Just like,
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
yeah,
Okay. My
it would
mistake.
just yeah, it would just be like, fucking demons and the devil, same shit for them, right?
Right.
When they when they
Because
invoke it.
like you're talking about the like left or right or wrong kind of thing, and I feel like it came down to systems. Like the systems that we have, like say voting, you only get one vote. That's why things are like left and right kind of thing, yes or no, right or wrong kind of thing, right? I think a lot of things, the reason why we have sides is that's just how our brains work. It's like in group and out group. Are you with us or are you against us kind of thing, right?
Well, that doesn't stack up if you're in a more even like a not a pluralistic society, right? Like you do have societies where it's more than just two sides to stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if
Yeah,
you're
you
looking,
do have sides, but like they found that depending on the system, things boil down to just having two sides. Like, I'm sure US back then had many parties, but because of the way voting works, like because you only have one vote and people have to vote strategically, it boils down to a two-party system over time.
yeah, okay, so in a way, yeah, you could, I wouldn't say that the system this was born because of the system was the way of this. It's not like the system
Well,
created this.
the system could be created because of the way you're
I
saying.
think it's the other way. Well, I think it's the other way around. They had a will first, right? Like
Yeah.
an aggregate will that they want to keep or change the system to be something like this.
Yeah.
Because in the beginning of the U.S., the history was there was no two-party system in the beginning.
Yeah,
right?
There wasn't.
It was something that was born after through like their history after a while it became something like this due to the conditions that they had themselves and the way that like this political structure is forming based on their like conditions, and then it became a two-party system where you choose back then it wasn't even there wasn't even a Republican and Democratic Party yet. If I remember, and this is just me, it was like a Whig Party and there was like a fucking whatever else, Federalist Party.
The Whig Party, as in the one with the judges, those
Something like that.
British
like,
Whigs.
yeah, close to like a very conservative sort of highbrow, noble family. I'm guessing. I don't know that much about it. I just know that it didn't come out, 1776. America was born, and all of a sudden there's a Democratic and a Republican
Because
Party.
I remember hearing in psychology or even evolution, like in groups and out groups was a lot of how we survive, right?
Yeah.
Like are you part of our tribe or are you against our tribe? Because part of your survival was being belonging and being. So one of the thing is that because humans are a very social animal,
yeah,
we survive by being together. So when you get outcasted, it's actually a detriment to your survival. A lot of people
of course.
survive alone. So even if you don't agree with the people around you, you pretend to agree because you need to be part of that community, right?
Yeah, like I get what you mean, where there's a set of values that you would share with a group of people, and then it may cause like a little bit of like a rivalry or an animosity against people that don't another group of people that don't live the way of life as you, and like they're the out group, you're the in group, whatnot. I just don't think that's like a direct thing. That's like a direct thing that would cause you to have this complex body politic that you see right now. I think it's too much of like
I don't think it's a direct cause, but I feel like
it's too much. I think it's too like reductionist to say like to say like, oh yeah, I think that would be like the root of it all.
I'm not saying it's the root of it. I'm just saying those are the way we chose. That's how we choose a lot of things in our lives back then, was because of survival, right?
Yeah, like way early in like the primordial.
Right, but that way of
beginnings
thinking that way of thinking hasn't left us. We're
I'm not
still.
gonna. I won't say that it doesn't have like an influence. I agree with you that
Mhm,
it has an influence to it. Like human beings have this influence where that influence plays a big part in like deciding. It's just even like fighting or cooperating or whatever, right? Like
mhm,
that does have a big say in
mhm,
in humanity, but
mhm,
when we're getting into weeds of it, like to explain the fucking the systems and the body politic that we have nowadays. I
mhm.
think that's too elemental. That's too that's
Elementary.
too much. No, that's too much at the most basic building block level, and it doesn't really explain everything else that came in between then and
Oh, I
now,
see.
right?
Right.
Like that's basically learning the alphabet, and then now we're trying to explain, how did fucking Shakespeare came to
Why
be,
is
right?
racism? Because it starts with an
Right.
R.
Which is true. Like this is the building block of fucking the written whatever word in your language, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens in between to kind of
Yeah.
explain where you are now, and that's
The
the
other
part
thing.
that I'm interested in.
Oh,
That's
okay.
part what I was saying. Like what,
Mhm.
it's very likely that a lot of this stems from that Abrahamic religious culture that a lot of these uh civilizations or people ex- experience. I think that was one of the main drivers. Like this was so pervasive, and um, it was so widespread and forceful. Like if you think about if that's the way it was for those people, especially those times, and you think for thousands of years, the
Mhm.
whole doctrine was, hey, you have to believe in Christianity or like now or even Islam, they're all Abrahamic religions, right? You have to believe in
Mhm.
this faith, my this faith that we all subscribe to, or
Mhm.
you're a heathen. We have to fight you back then.
Mhm.
I think that you give thousands of years of that,
Mhm.
you're bound to get something that's really deeply ingrained into like the collective psyche of a society or a population, right?
Yeah.
To this day, even now, it's a big deal. It's a big deal whether the U.S. president goes to church or not, right?
Yeah.
It's a big deal whether like they view, just even just Muslims, like same Abrahamic branch
Right.
of religious faith, but they're different enough from
Would you think it'd
Christianity.
be a crazy thing if the president was Muslim? Like, would
I
that
think it
be?
would be. I don't think that they can accept a black president now. They can accept a woman president. I'm sure they can even probably accept a gay president now. I don't think they're ready to accept a non-Christian president.
Yeah.
I really do don't. I really do think that they're not ready for that yet. I mean, it's
Uh,
so strong, and
that it would
uh,
be a strong conflict.
yeah. But
Yeah.
this does show like yeah. I said yeah. Replace the words of instead of it's not fashionable to say, "Oh, we're doing this in the name of God now," right? But
Yeah.
you say stuff like, "Hey, we're gonna invade Iraq
Well,
in the
even
name of freedom or in the name of democracy and stuff."
yeah.
It's different words, but it invokes the same sort of crusading feeling that they have in there. This like, and I think I've read some books where people coined it like this is the missionary mode of diplomacy or whatever the fuck that they tried to describe what the American or Western world um, attitude towards all this, and I really agree with that. And the way I thought about it, this whole fucking shit that we were talking about, it's quite convincing to me that this is their religion. They still live as well, like fucking missionaries to spread the word of, fill in the blank. Now the blank is, like democracy, whatever,
Hmm.
to the rest of the world and to convert the heathens that don't believe in this to this to be considered, part of worthy of, I don't know, living or coexisting. And if they
Yeah.
don't, they're the enemy, right?
Well, I another philosophical thing I wanted to mention was the idea that people want absolute, like they like answers. It's hard for them to have unknown in their as an
Yeah,
answer,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So rather than saying like, why do we accept or why do we allow say dictatorship in the world? Like why does North Korea have a dictator kind of thing, right?
yeah,
It's kind of like, well, we don't really know, right? Versus versus the answer, we don't, and that's why we're going to war with them, kind of thing, right? People like to have absolute, and people are uncomfortable with ambiguity and nuances. It's
I
tough.
wouldn't even say it's just ambiguity itself, or but yeah, the nuances, especially if you think of a way where it's like less of a, if people really like to think mechanically, like, this happens because of this, right? And
Hmm.
I think some contradictions they won't be able to really reconcile with that, like, oh, this country can be without human rights, without democratic elections, but it can still exist, and maybe even a strong country, right? So you can
Hmm.
name a couple that exist like this, and in their mind, I see people make these excuses all the time, where it's like, oh, it's because the government has brainwashed everyone, or it's because the government doesn't provide does keeps information from them, or it's because they got lucky and whatnot, and but always deep down they're saying like, but only if only the people knew, or if only we get rid of that one impediment, then all they would, like they would overthrow them in the name of democracy, because
Hmm.
everybody in their right minds that are good would think like me, and the person making this, like would think like me, and everybody thinking something that's completely opposite of me, like they're not worth fucking anything. They're not even human.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then I and I think it's not it's not from a it's not that people are scared of ambiguity or they like shy away from it. Some people, I think they need to have that mechanical sequence of things in their thought. They can't think that, oh, people can live completely differently, or these contradictions can coexist at the same time for something.
Hmm. Um, to add to your religious point, when you're talking about Islam, I'm not sure if I talked about this in the past, but there's this talk with David Eagleman, and he talks about religion
I
and
can't wait for
something
us to
he,
get canceled.
well, something he said I thought was a really good, interesting topic. I asked people who are religious, right, and I
Yeah,
asked them, if there's a true religion, how come it's not randomly distributed like in the world, right?
yeah.
Why is it all local? Like, why is Islam in the Middle East? Why is Christianity in Europe? Or, like, if there's a true religion, you would think it's randomly distributed. Like, the natives would become Christian, or someone in the Middle East would be born Christian.
Oh, you mean like if there is an actual God, it wouldn't just be in one place. Like it would
Yeah,
just the shit
exactly.
would
It would
sprout.
just it would just appear everywhere, right? It would be like you're the chosen one and stuff like that. And
Yeah, but that's when you get this really fucked up sequence of this evolution of thinking, because obviously the religions sprout out in a certain place due to the conditions of whatever that place, right?
yeah, well,
And then
that's if you believe religion is like a truth kind of thing.
yeah, obviously,
Well,
obviously
like if
we
you
know this
believe,
way.
because like for example, like math, like let's say logic, like math, for example, that's a truth that we know, and that is something that everyone had when they grew up. Like China had math, and so the Europeans, right? Like
Allegedly,
it was,
because there's some people that don't believe in math. You have to believe. You have
but
to
like I
reconcile with
would
that.
I would assume that like their math made sense. Like, hey, if I add 1 + 1, it makes 2, kind of thing in China.
Not
And
to
let's say
Phil, if he was here, he would not.
perhaps not, but like I'm saying, if you were like, to believe in math, I would assume that Europeans had arithmetic, and when they compare notes with China, they're like, hey, a logic that we never talk to each other seems to work, and it seems like this is a truth kind of thing, right? And
Yeah.
I would think religion would be the same. That if there's a true religion, I would expect it to be a random distribution where you would find Christianity anywhere, any parts of the world without them being introduced, right? Like that you didn't need crusaders, right?
To
You would
spread
need
it.
someone, yeah, to spread it. What you would need is rescuers. Like, hey, there's a Christian born in China. We need to go and rescue him. Like, kind of like I don't know what show. There's a lot of movies like that, right? Where
But
there's
if
a
he,
chosen one that's born randomly, and they would go and bring,
yeah,
like a Jedi, for example. a Jedi is born here. We got to go and train them, right? Like
Right,
that's
like
what
the
I would
force, yeah,
expect.
like the force is a real thing, and you can detect the
Yeah,
force and whatever.
and
You
they would
see, the
find them
thing is,
randomly. That's what I think religion would be like. If true religion exists, I would expect it to just someone be born with it, not they have to learn it.
right, and that's the thing. Like, okay, first of all, I'm gonna talk about two things, and then one thing will be, the first thing will be,
Hmm.
it's because there's nothing material about religion. That's why you're not gonna get the same shit that pops up in all these in all these random places, right? Like even in Star Wars, in that story, they make the Force a material thing, right? A kid can fucking would be born that could move something with their fucking Force, right? Like
Right.
the powers would manifest itself in the material world. It wouldn't be just stories and just acting on pure faith. Something would happen, and then they could, like X-Men, like mutant powers would manifest, right? And they
Yeah.
would do stuff. That's why they would be like, oh yeah, this kid's a mutant, and then they would, like this mutation would be something that's real that pops up of the earth. The math is a real thing, right? Like it's not born out of something that's like metaphysical. It's a very physical thing. Like people can work it out. Like, assuming they're not somebody that believes numbers are fake or whatever. You can count stuff and then you can subtract stuff and then you just work it
Well, I
all
feel like that's
logically.
a philosophical topic because there are some mathematical expression that you couldn't explain in
Yeah,
real
yeah,
terms, right?
but it's
Like
but
you
it's
couldn't explain imaginary numbers, for
but
example, like
imaginary
negative.
numbers, yeah, but that works from an evolution of something based in the material world, right? And then eventually you get to an advanced form where you kind of use like the metaphysical or the abstract to try to bridge some of the logical steps, like the logical things that have proof that you already see in the material world. You're using that leap of well, not even a leap. You're using something to fill in logically what you would
So
perceive.
you're saying like you take the properties of the real world and you can superimpose it into the imaginary world, and that's how we kind of bridge that
Yeah, and
gap.
it has to like correspond to the real world, right? Like when they talk about black matter, it has to correspond to the actual fucking matter in the world, right? And it's
Mm.
it's the negative of matter or
Yeah,
whatever,
that's
right?
a fair
But when you
assessment.
talk about like Gabriel and the angels and everybody descending, there's nothing, there's nothing you can actually.
Okay, in terms of material, you could argue that hearing the word of God is a material power. Like who's the guy who invented Mormon? The
But
John something.
it's still a guy. In the end, it was a guy that propagates it, right? So like
Yeah.
the thing is, you wouldn't be able to see the material existence of God because it's not God propagating. It's not like it's still a man, like a material, like a real man that
Well, you don't know if
exists in the
he.
material world doing this stuff,
You
right?
can't prove to me that he didn't hear the word of Jesus Christ.
But that's not the point of this. It's not like you're trying to prove the negative. It's just when the guy's
Hmm.
like preaching or whoever starts of whatever faith, whatever, right? It's
Hmm.
people will see that as a man. Like yeah, the Christianity, you believe that Jesus is God and he came onto earth and preached it all around. But I mean, like, but if you didn't believe in that, you just be like, oh, Jesus is a guy that spread this around, and
Hmm.
Muhammad is even for Islam, it's even more grounded in reality because people don't claim Muhammad to be a god. They just claim to him to be the earthly prophet, right? He's a guy. He doesn't claim to be God or anything of that sort. He claims to be spreading the word of God, right?
Hmm.
So it's a man. It's materially it's a guy. It's a guy spreading it, right? So it's not like an ethereal being comes in and says all this shit and like turns the world upside down and say, "Hey, see? So now worship me," right? It's not something like that. That would get a lot of people to instantly turn into theists.
Right.
But
Okay. Fair enough. That's a
but
good
my
point about materialism.
Yeah, but the second, like, it has to be observed kind of in the world. That's where you get like the meat of people, believing things and reason being, like actually you can actually prove stuff, right? The other part is like, yeah, that way of thinking where you just outlined where, okay, well, if this is the word of God, why doesn't everybody have it or whatever, right?
Hmm.
But their thought doesn't turn to, oh, so like, doesn't this disprove it? No, their thought most of the people, the fanatics of the old world and the new current world would think that no, if anything, there's something stopping the word of God from, or whatever, the good word of being spread to everywhere, right? And then they start to view themselves, as people like to do, as themselves as the big deal that would spread this wonderful thing that they've come about to the rest of it. They would view it as like a mission, like, and that's a very real thing where all these missionaries and everybody that wanted to proselytize about their religion thought like, I'm doing God's work. I'm the missioner. I'm the carrier of this word to places that haven't heard of it yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't think like, oh, why doesn't this sprout randomly in some place? They're thinking about, I will take this randomly to some place.
Right. I wonder if they thought about that when that. I don't know. I mean, you do make a good point that when I do bring this argument to people who believe in religion, not many of them do think about that. They don't go, "Huh, that is strange." They're just like, "Oh, yeah, I guess that didn't happen."
Right.
They don't really think. They don't view it like, "Oh, yeah, that is a good argument," kind of thing.
A lot of humanity just creates their own story about these things, right? So when they do, it's like, oh, is exactly that. It's, this is a test. This is a test for God or whoever, whatever deity
Yeah.
that says, if we were truly worthy of this, we would spread it and whatever,
And
make him proud.
From my position, I'm not like saying religion doesn't exist. I'm just saying that it doesn't seem like we have enough information for us to decide whether it does or does not exist.
I'm not out there to kind of, I don't want to go around trying to prove like fucking God doesn't exist and all that shit. I don't want to go around and say to people, religious people, your thing, your shit is a fairy tale or whatever. Like people believe whatever they want. People can do whatever they want. My whole shtick is like, if you're in a position where you can like cause harm to somebody based on something like this, and especially so, I don't even care too much about the individual people, but groups and societies and countries, like the big picture sort of deal. When
Like we're going back to the whole president being Muslim kind of thing, right?
I don't care whatever the faith the president is, but when a country feels like they need to go on a crusade against another group of people, when one group of people feel like they need to go against a crusade on another group of people based on no material beliefs of any kind, it's metaphysical, abstract beliefs, right? That's when I'm like, yeah, that's kind of dumb. Like, you people shouldn't fucking believe in this stuff.
Well, I don't even think the physical justifies that either. Like when U.S. invaded Iraq, right? For supposedly possessing
WMDs and stuff. Like,
but it was purely just economic grab. Like even that wasn't right of them. But
no, of course not. It was basically just criminal. But I mean, but you can see like afterwards, when there was no WMDs, what did they fall upon? Right? It was basically like, oh shit, you can't tell everybody. It was a colossal fuck up, right? But the people in charge were kind of already had sort of a plan. We're like, you know what? If we can't find WMDs, we're going in there to liberate the Iraqi people, give them freedom and democracy and all that, right? And that will be enough for people in that country to buy it in America, of why you went over there to basically destroy a completely different group of people, right? And people bought it. And like that, you'll get a lot of even like the supposedly smart commentariat. They would go on the news cycles and say this stuff like, yeah, we may have not found WMDs, but would you really want Saddam to still be in power? Would you say we shouldn't have gone in there to restore, to give the Iraqi people these freedoms and democracy that was robbed of them, right? Like, it's the same. I keep on seeing that same scene from the Dante's Inferno game where the bishop just tells everybody to go east to Jerusalem to fucking spill the blood of heathens, right? That's basically, people are just going on TV to telling people, hey, it's correct that we went over there to spill the blood of heathens.
Yeah, seems like
like I got religious friends. You got religious friends. I don't like want to convert them or whatever to disbelieving stuff. Like, that's their life and that's how they're raised. That's whatever they want to do, right? Like, I don't want that to change for them. Like, if it's a good driving force in their life and it's been good to them, there's no reason to change it. They can believe in whatever, right?
Hmm.
And but like I also have on that vein of note, I have a problem with some people, some like atheists that go
Oh
around
yeah.
trying to do exactly that, where it's like they have just a complete
Well,
problem.
maybe that's their they're the Crusaders, right?
Yeah, they're the
They're the
Crusaders, but for the
Antichrist.
fucking opposite. Like they're the
Yeah.
Crusaders for antimatter, whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, why? What's the point? Like, what, you're just doing the same thing where it's like, oh, what's the point? You convert all these people away
Well,
to,
but you know that kid from The Matrix where he told Neo there is no spoon kind of thing.
yeah.
Maybe that's it. They just walk around telling you, "Hey, hold this spoon.
Well, I
There
think
is no
some
spoon."
people, it's just like you said, some people just have a real problem with people that are different. And in that
Mm-hmm.
meaning of the word, like they just believe shit that's differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, a fucking, you at the very lowest of the low would be like the racists that
Well, I
have a
think
problem with like physical race. And at the very highbrow part of that would just be people that are completely, they can't tolerate someone that thinks
I
whatever
think that's a
differently than them.
psychology thing again. Like when we talk about like the reason you want people to believe in what you believe in because it uh, reinforces your own beliefs, right? And it makes you confident in what you believe in, right? It's that whole like group kind of thing. But like we were talking about how you don't like how one group infringes another. Like that's where you kind of draw the line in terms of people's belief, right?
I don't like
Like
if it infringing. Yeah, first, okay, at the very top, like the most like the worst one would be infringing on someone else's on another group of people. But when you're completely dead wrong and you're trying to force it on someone else.
yeah,
One step below that will be like, okay, you're in the right, but you're kind of like forcing it on whatever fucking people, right?
yeah,
At the very lowest, I would say like, yeah, in the ideal world, everybody leaves everybody alone. But I understand the world's not ideal. So at the very,
no,
I guess the most tolerable part is like, all right, I guess I feel like they can have their self defense where if another group is the one that is aggressing them and trying to fucking forcefully convert or whatever, impose their beliefs on someone else, you can defend yourself and basically, like fucking counter counter
Well,
convert.
it's
I'm not really sure how to explain
there's
that,
a
but
there's a board game called Small World. I don't know if you played it. It's kind of like a Risk kind of game where
yeah.
yeah, and it's I think it's designed a little bit better than Risk. But the whole
Uh,
idea is that you're on the board game where there's not enough room for everyone to exist, and
yeah.
you're forced to fight with other people to claim their land in order to repopulate and make your forces bigger. And it's kind of like that, where you're saying that it's difficult for everyone to coexist, and that people will overlap or infringe on each other's
Yeah.
beliefs or land and stuff. Because like the whole like Israel thing, right? There are different groups that believe that that land is theirs, right? Or
Yeah,
like
yeah. It's a
Pakistan and
whole
India.
clusterfuck.
Yeah, exactly. Or even like China, or even like
Yeah.
China and India, right? They have areas that they contest with each other and causes issues. So it's
Yeah.
borders is
Yeah.
a really interesting topic, I guess you could say. Because like if you
Yeah,
look
because
at
everybody basically divvying up land just
everyone,
so.
yeah, and it's not all peaceful. There are people that will fight. Like Europe is one of those few where they don't have physical borders, right? Like you can cross to another country just riding your bike through, and you're like, oh, I'm in another country. I didn't have to check my
Yeah.
password through the borders. But like Canada, US, there's a huge line across the 51 latitude, right?
Yeah.
Or is it the 49 parallel?
Now, well,
It's something like that.
the Canada-U.S. border wouldn't even be too good example because that border is relatively, well, until
Well,
recently it was really
it's
relaxed
it's
too.
not it's not yeah, we don't have guards, but in space you can physically see it. Like they cut a tree line to show that border. Like there's a physical absence of space between the border of Canada and US, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, these borders, um, yeah, like we're at this point in humanity where these borders are enforced precisely because
Hmm.
these countries, these states. by necessity, right now they need to exist, and you need to have these
Yeah.
borders to prevent people
Well,
from fucking killing each other over fucking land, right? Like you're drawing it out and saying,
yeah. I wonder when like that was decided because like if you look at U.S. history, you know, most of Texas was owned by Mexico, and then
yeah, and
U.S.
you fought it over.
U.S. pushed their border right, and then decided, okay, we'll draw the line here, and that's Mexico, and this is Texas or U.S.
That's
I guess.
actually that's actually a good. This actually comes into an actually interesting point, and I'm gonna nerd it out with you. With the whole question of the borders and fucking nation states and all that, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the mainstream view of it is like this was born out of Europe when they made the whole Westphalian Treaty, right? Between the
West
European
alien.
Westphalian.
Oh,
That's
West alien.
fail with a PH, so West PH alien, Phalian,
Oh, okay.
Westphalia or whatever, right? You Wikipedia that's when they would kind of that's when they came out and they sort of
I'm
like
sure all
they
the
sort of hashed
audiences.
out the rules of like what the borders would be and what like and what um how the conduct should be between countries and how and what an like what constitutes like what a nation what a state is like that's when they got together and I guess you can say formally hashed out what a country is, what its borders should be, and like how what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, all that sort of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's an interesting way of thinking it, especially a nation state way, because if you are a person that reads about like
Wait,
East
I
Asian
can't seem to
history,
find Westphalian. I just keep getting French words.
oh god, I'll send the link to you.
I see Westphalia, which is the
Westphalia,
region
that's yeah,
northwest western Germany.
yeah. You gotta you know what? Treaty of Westphalia, blah blah blah. Yeah, pretty much. Treaty of Westphalia, Peace of Westphalia, whatever.
Okay.
Ended the 30 Years' War, whatever. Like that's what the people say. That's like the proto agreement for nation state and whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you go to like, but if you read about East Asian history, you know, the concepts were kind of different. So then I would imagine that the rest of the world, you know, because it's not like everybody can magically get on board with the exact same way of thinking of Europe. It's also very different. And the way
Mm-hmm.
that borders or administration or the way that it was divvied out is kind of even just by what the country was a little different from how the Europeans came to be about it. And then I think that's where a lot of disagreement on how maps are drawn back then, like how
Mm-hmm.
people interpret how big an empire was because maybe you know, like let's just say the Tang Dynasty of China, they included their um, not just administered areas, but also like vassalized areas and also areas where they feel like they would have controlled, and they would just mark the borders at whatever river or wherever that they would go around. But then
Mm-hmm.
you would come apart with this. You would come out with this big map of this large territory, where not all of it would just belong to the country. Some of it was either vassal states or it was like commanderies and stuff, and that wouldn't usually be interpreted as like the border of an actual country. And then you get these like sort of and you get these sort of like disagreements on like, oh, what did the actual map kind of look like? But then on a further note, like just by nationality, it was a big fucking um uh point of difference. Like I remember reading about the end of the Qing dynasty, and then they had to come to grips with what the Europeans meant by like nationality and all that stuff, right? Like because before then it wasn't really nationality. This is the emperor, right? That's the emperor that ruled all the people of this land or whatever, right? They weren't
Mm-hmm.
thinking of like citizenship or they weren't like they would have the concept of the people of the emperor, right? But they wouldn't have something like citizenship and like fucking border crossings, embassies, and all that sort of deal. So then, even like, so then ethnicities was a was kind of a new thing. Like, um, people didn't actually divide themselves in ethnicities, not really back then, right? So, but this is a modern concept that people are applying for, and then when they look back into history, they're kind of like going backwards to apply this like modern concept back then,
Mm-hmm.
right? Nowadays, you try to prove ethnicity, using just like a benchmark that you create yourself in the modern period, even with
Well, I feel
DNA.
like ethnicity is the the issue of need of categorization. Like
Yeah,
people need to correct. Like, why does it matter whether a tomato
but
is
it's not even,
or a
but it's not even
vegetable?
like, yeah, it's not even like a natural categorization per se, because
Hmm.
even when you do the DNA test, you're basically making like the control, the reference is just the populations that you have now, right? So then it was like, oh, whatever DNA markers you have in whatever area, you're corresponding those things based on what's there now, right? But
Hmm.
but applying it backwards, you don't have that. There's no way you can have something like that. It's not like they had DNA tests back then, right?
Hmm.
So like this entire thing, like that was born from like onwards from European like a consciousness of nation states. People like to apply it like retroactively to in history, and then so you'll get some really fucked up ways of thinking, like, oh, like whatever, Alexander's fucking mass like empire in Macedonia and all that stuff. Were they Greek? Were they really Greek? Were they not Greek? Oh, but they're ethnically different than Greek. Or, like, oh, what about the Mongol Empire? Which one was Chinese? Which one was Mongol? What about the Indians? Who's Mughal? Who's Muslim? Who's Hindu? Right?
Hmm.
Nowadays, you have distinctions. Back then, you didn't have distinctions. But you're taking, like, the nowadays stuff and you're trying to apply it back in time. And it doesn't fucking work
Right.
like that.
So you're saying like Muslim didn't exist until this time.
No, no, but like Muslim as a faith, you could be like whoever's a Muslim is what? How do you define it? It's just people who believes in the Muslim faith. You don't have a DNA test for who is a Muslim, right?
Right.
But people like to think of it that way, like Muslim is an ethnicity, right? Even like Chinese itself, it's not an ethnicity, and that's what a lot of people that aren't familiar with it, they don't realize that, right?
So if you were to say when the Chinese existed then as an ethnicity,
It wouldn't
is
be as
there
an ethnicity. That's the thing. It's and especially like
well you would call it ethnicity now though.
well, yeah, that's but that's not a correct label. That's just the label that everybody goes with because they don't
Oh, okay.
know any better, right? Yeah, like what's your ethnicity on the Canadian census? Oh yeah, you write Chinese, right? Because that's fucking like like it just simplifies fucking the way it's done. It's a bastardization of a lot of things actually, but it's just for
Hmm.
the sake of simplification, for just to fill out paperwork. But
So
it
yeah, it
is.
is.
There's no
It is.
ethnicity if
It's
that's
like
Chinese. There's no. There's. I would even argue
so
that
do you
there's
feel
not
like
really.
ethnicity wouldn't exist if paperwork didn't exist? If medical records didn't need to know what your
No, I
ethnicity
mean
is?
like I think people just they have this habit of taking whatever they are familiar with now
You know,
and they're applying it just wholesale on things that did was not even compatible with what they perceive now.
because you know how like Trump talks about like the COVID numbers are up because their testing numbers are up.
Yeah.
Like I would love for him to say like gender exists because the application has the word gender in it. Like if they didn't ask for gender, we don't need to have this discussion.
I know, and there's the whole thing with gender now, like gender doesn't exist and all that. I don't even look that too much into it because I don't know, it's too much for me.
Well, it's
I don't have
almost
it. It's like okay, I have my own way of thinking about it, but like I'm not gonna go
mm.
around and start saying like fucking there's only two
Well,
genders
I
or
think
shit.
I think for majority of people it doesn't really matter. Like it doesn't
It's
really
up.
matter in most
It
cases. Like it's not
really
going to
it
affect you.
won't. It doesn't affect your life most of the time,
But
but
I do think
to the
it for
people
some
that it
people it does.
does, yeah.
Yeah,
The people that does, you want to say, yeah, well, listen to what they have to say. At least, like
exactly.
fucking whatever. But to me, it's not. It doesn't wreck my world that like, oh,
Yeah,
there's more than one
I
gender
guess
out.
I
There's
guess
more than
where
two genders out there.
I guess when the general public comes online would be like NBA basketball. It was like what that totally isn't the guy playing.
Yeah, at that point, I'm like, what the fuck's going on? I gotta update myself. Like
Exactly.
I'm not afraid to admit, like to me, I've grown up with just female male. That was basically the whole thing, and then you got like trannies that are in the whole mix of that, right? Or hermaphrodites.
Or people who just don't want to label
That's just
themselves
me.
as
Like when I become old, that's just my old part of the brain. Be like, I never wanted to invest too much thought into this. That's just what it
you
was
know
growing up. As long as I'm not
would
hurting
you
anybody, I'm, like whatever. That's the way I think. I'm not gonna demand everybody else thinks
So,
like me.
for
That's
example,
just
like
what I am at.
with washrooms, right? You have men and women, and
Yeah,
so when your girlfriend goes to the washroom, they always bring a girlfriend.
yeah.
If they're with you and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna go to the washroom," would you be expected to go with them in the new age where washrooms were
No, I
dual
wouldn't.
gender?
I wouldn't.
Like,
Well, especially me and my wife, we grew up in quote unquote the old world, right? So we
right?
wouldn't act like that.
But
Maybe
you
if
wouldn't be
my
like,
future, my daughter or son would be like, I'm like, what the fuck? And then they would just be like, you know what, Dad, you're just too fucking like old. You're just a fucking boomer. What do you know?
right?
It'll
I
become one of those things.
That'd be a weird thing as a boyfriend. You'd be like, "Oh, my girlfriend went to washroom. I guess I have to go with her." Because you have these gender neutral washrooms, right? I think that'd be so weird.
That would
Anyways,
be. I don't know. Like my whole thing, like as long as you don't hurt anybody, you don't, and you don't want to hurt other people, fucking just let whatever be, right?
yeah, I love that argument or like saying like the reason you don't want gender neutral washroom is because it will increase rape or something like that.
Yeah.
And then it's like okay, if someone wanted to rape someone, it's not like a sign was going to stop them anyways, right? So how would this increase
It
rape, for
is
example?
most of it is just like this. It's just like this old. It's just this old fear that you'll have for yourself, where
Actually, I
it's
would
like
even think washrooms were created back then like that, right? They were gender neutral washrooms.
I
It was
think yeah,
only until
it's just a fucking washroom that everybody
I
goes in
guess
to
I don't
shit and
know at what
stuff.
point that they decide, oh, we have to separate men and women and create different toiletries.
I don't know. Like it has to do how your society thinks, right? Like to this day, a lot the most hardcore, most conservative factions of Islam, let's say in Saudi Arabia, they still segregate women and men that way, even in
Right.
public, right? The women aren't supposed to like walk too close or intimately with other males and stuff, right? And then
Hmm.
you gotta, like you want to go attend business or whatever, like you can't be going with some strange guy. You gotta be with either a family member or your husband or whoever, right?
Yeah.
And they
It's
still got
almost
that
like
stuff.
it's almost like a pet in a sense. Like a dog couldn't go to a dog park by itself. It needs its owner, right? It's
Yeah,
almost like that.
but like their whole way of thinking about that is they want to keep the woman pure and protected and whatever, right? That's the thinking
Yeah.
that came about this. If you were just gonna, if you just learned about this today, you'd be like, wow, that's fucked up. And if you live in like a Western country, right? But
Hmm.
like, and you would think, oh, what kind of evil person thought of this? But the intention of this was not evil. It was
Hmm.
based on something where they were like, oh, we want to keep the purity of it or whatever.
Well,
But
that's also
in doing so, they come up with something that would be
it created something evil in a
well,
sense.
well, people would perceive it as evil,
Yeah.
and especially if your society's not like that. It's not like yours. You would view it as evil, right?
Well, that was the argument, right? There people were saying like, why would you cover yourself because this is something a man made, right? Like, why don't you express yourself? And then for women in that culture, it's like, well, this is our culture, and in a sense, yeah, maybe it grew with the wrong intent, but this is how they represent it, or this is their way of showing respect to their own culture.
Yeah, we all have our own opinions on whatever the fuck happened. But my thing would be like, you know what? It'd be better if people just kept it as their own opinion, especially people that well, like that this doesn't affect them in their lives. If you're like a Western guy and you're criticizing this or whatever, and you have
Hmm.
no stake in it, then it's like, why, right? Or,
Hmm.
or if you're saying anything pro, for, or against, but like if this is something that needs to change, I think the people that actually live this life, they're the ones that need to come and deal with whatever conflict this gives to them, right? If they all want to fucking be all veiled up, then they can do whatever they want. If they have issues on it, then they themselves are the ones that should deal and fucking work this out. Even if they need a revolution or whatever, it's their own. I don't want like fucking outsiders coming in and like imposing whatever they think is moral and just on a group of people they
So
don't
then,
understand.
how would you feel about masks? Because for some people, that's what they feel like. People are imposing things onto them
Oh,
to
this
wear a
is not
mask.
masks are not something based on like religious values and whatever, right? This is like hard fucking science, and people are like,
Right.
yo, if you don't to stop mitigate this public health crisis, like this mask, this is a real material thing that you can do as a population to fight this.
One thing I thought was hilarious was someone showed a video of a news network talking to, and this was in the past, talking to people saying like, how do you feel about the new law wearing seatbelts? And people were like, oh, I fucking hate it. Government's trying to control us. Or they'll be like, it's my choice. I'm not hurting anybody if I'm not wearing a seatbelt kind of thing, which, totally is wrong because they are hurting people. And it's the exact same argument almost. Like people who are refusing to wear masks. It's just a repeat of people who didn't want to wear seatbelts.
It's even worse because the mask, you don't wear a mask, you can actually end up hurting someone, killing someone directly, right?
Yeah, same with seatbelts.
Same with seatbelts, but not as direct. Like directly masks, it's much more obvious. With seatbelts, yeah, you can hurt people that aren't you by not wearing a seatbelt, but usually,
because you can whale yourself into their car.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, but nowadays it's not. Let's just say like the circumstances have to align for you to crash through both your windshield and the other windshield and whatever, right?
Fair
like
enough,
you hit a fucking tree by yourself and you kill everybody and you kill yourself because you're not wearing a seatbelt, whatever, right? But I mean, like, yeah, they passed a seatbelt law just to fucking stop people from dying. Like that should be pretty obvious, right? But people had a problem with that. But this with the mask,
people had a problem with that.
Yeah, but people with the mask, like it's not just yourself. This directly affects other people much more than, I would argue, much more than seatbelts would. Yeah. Comparatively, right?
Okay.
And people still don't want to do it.
So when you say like when there's scientific things that are backing up, then situation's different when we impose rules. But when it comes to religion, then it's kind of like if it's not hurting anyone, kind of thing, then it's not a big deal.
Well, it has to be. I'm the guy that you can't apply blanket whatever values to anything, especially when it comes to like historically matters. Like a country, you have to consider the entire historical condition of it, the entire context of it. People don't like to consider history or the context of things, but you do need to do it. You need to understand it, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, like everybody that has a fucking problem with whatever with Islam or now the way they conduct how Islam is in the world, like fucking like what I'm just like, why? What does it matter to you? Like if they need to deal with something, they need to deal with it, right? Like I mean, the most contentious part will be like, okay, what happens when they have decided to fight, like this group of people? Let's just say when people view it as like a crusade or whatever, like, what happens when 9/11 happens, or what happens when Al Qaeda attacks you, or whatever the fuck, right? I mean, like, okay, fucking Al Qaeda. Like, what was the difference? Like, what happens if, like the Germany declared war against you, right? It's the entire fucking Christian faith of Europe declare war against you. It's like fucking specific people that fight you, that attack you. You retaliate against them, sure, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the whole context of that was, Al Qaeda and all that stuff was born directly from U.S. foreign policy and shit, right? So you want to fucking topple a country, whatever. You know what? Who can really stop you? You're the top country, but you can't say like, oh, well, fucking, this is a war against Islam and shit like that, right? When it's like, okay, there's a billion Islamic people out there, different countries at different varying degrees of stuff, and they're just connected by just maybe one official faith that each group of people or country has, and that's like Islam. They don't even have the same type, right? There's Sunni and Shia and the whole smorgasbord of everything else that comes in between them. And then from that forth on, because 9/11 happens, you declare war against all of Islam or some shit. It's the new crusade, right? You're asking to stir up a hornet's nest at that point.
Yeah.
All this stuff. Well, all the stuff that comes up after that, because then before 9/11, no one really gave a shit about whether women in Saudi Arabia veiled themselves up or not, right? No one gave a shit about that. It was only after, and then everybody was interested to pronounce all the differences.
Now we're like celebrating when women can now get their own driver's license.
Yeah, well, not even that. Like they want to pronounce the differences because the whole goal is to is to differentiate, to alienate these people away from yourselves. You don't. The whole goal is to indoctrinate people to think of them not as someone that's more similar to yourself, but someone that's alien and different from you, a heathen,
Hmm.
right?
Well,
So
they
then,
said that to get people on board, it's easier to just create an enemy than
oh, of
to,
course, and
yeah,
that's what the stupid playbook is all the time.
the
It's
playbook, yeah,
well, you
the
can,
political playbook, right?
well, yeah, exactly. You know, there is different methods to get people on board. You don't necessarily have to create an enemy, right? Usually,
Hmm.
that's the people that are left with that. That's like a last resort. You've already fucked up. Like you fucked up. You couldn't find another way to motivate your people or population and shit, right? So you gotta fucking find something,
Was
an
the
enemy for everybody to unite.
is that primitive fear,
Yeah,
the fear of the unknown, the
at that
fear of
point,
the
people
enemy.
don't realize they fucked up already. Like that, you've already exhausted or you've already fucked up all the other options you can try to deal with. Your entire
Hmm.
toolbox, you threw it out. You only kept one tool, and that was, like fucking last
The
resort.
panic button.
We need an enemy. Yeah, we need people to be afraid and shit.
Well, so this whole conversation started with Lena asking you these questions. So
Oh
then,
yeah,
after you told her this encyclopedia of information, what was her understanding now? Like, does
blew
she
her
feel like?
fucking mind. No, she was like, yeah, she did. It made sense to her the way I explained it to her, and she saw it like that because she was. Yeah, she was just kind of like, why are people like thinking this way, or why are people, and especially in the news, they like to really blow it up, right? Hyper,
Mm,
um,
the news is they love to create divides between. They like to stir drama. Let's say.
of course, right? And then, but you can notice people like the people's attitudes, and very often or not, it's usually people, or I always say like the people that think they know a little bit about something. Those are the worst people, right? That's where the saying comes from, where a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. What
Hmm.
they're referring to is people who think that they know a little bit about something that
And they
they
feel like
they
they're the
cause the most.
expert.
They can cause the most damage on something if you
Well,
only
there was
have half
a
knowledge of something, right?
I forgot there was a research about that. There were research about like um, when you're someone who you don't know anything about a subject, what's your confidence level is usually like really low or zero kind of thing.
Yeah,
And as you gain information, your confidence goes up exponentially. And when you just have a little bit, you feel like you're super confident. But then as you learn more about the information, your confidence starts dropping because then you become more humble. Because the more expert of a subject you are, the more you realize how much you don't know about a subject, right? Whereas
yeah,
when you're someone who just knows a little bit, you feel like you're an expert because you feel like,
yeah.
oh, I know everything kind of thing, right? And you're
I
very
feel like,
confident.
yeah, and I think that's actually like I see that as well. Like the experts and stuff, they would be the ones that if they're really like true experts and shit, they're not gonna be the one bullshitting about a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I feel like
They'll be
you
like,
can
yeah,
tell an
there is
expert.
quite a bit of stuff that I don't know. And they'll say
Yeah,
that, like, because in the search for knowledge or whatever, you find out that there's so much, it opens up so many different branches of unknowns
like
and stuff.
if you listen to Fauci, a lot of things he'll say like, "Oh, we don't have an answer for that," or like he's very humble about the things he knows and things he doesn't know. Like compared to Trump, when he says, "No, the reasons COVID's numbers are up is because we're doing more testing," it's just absurd. But he Trump says it like he's super confident that that's the reason, and while he's not wrong about it,
Yeah.
he's also he also doesn't realize that the more testing that we do, the higher the rate of satisfaction people have. Like the more confidence they have in the nation, right?
Yeah.
Because they feel like, okay, we're in the right direction. The less testing you do, the people's faith in the nation goes down
And
because
and
people are
also
worried.
I also hope that people realize that this is not just this won't be a Trump only program. If this is an alternate reality where it was Hillary Clinton in charge of this and it was a bungled fucking COVID response, she would say almost the exact same shit. She would say like she would be in that mode where she'd be like, "Oh, this is the way to do it." Like I know everything, and this I promise you we're doing it the right way. Or it's just right now. This is the how the politicians
Right.
in these countries work,
Well, what if it
right?
was Bernie? Do you think Bernie would have a different response, or
I
Bernie wouldn't have
think
let this happen?
I personally think that Bernie would probably fucking own up to it. but that would be the end of his fucking career, right?
Oh, that's true. He might not get elected.
But you can also easily see you could maybe see a Bernie that would deflect blame and say that this is whatever, we're on
Right.
the
He
right
would
track, and
he would
this is
say like the reason we're in this pandemic is because of big pharma.
yeah,
And
big pharma. You
and
could, but it's more likely Bernie would not be like that, right? But we
no,
don't know.
right.
But he has to exist within that cage of the American politician, right? You have to be you become a certain way if you're an
Right.
American politician.
Because your
It's just the
view
way
is
it
that
molds
Trump
you.
Trump isn't the individual that created this, it's that the US nation themselves created the Trump
Yes,
person.
yes, in aggregate, and also Trump is just the most obvious. He's just the most obvious in appearance of this, right?
Yeah.
If
He's
you
the
were going to say,
representation, the manifestation of the people of the
yeah,
American.
yeah, exactly, exactly, and yeah, so even if Trump wasn't in power, I honestly don't know whether the U.S. would even get their shit together to deal with this. And by all indications, if fucking Biden is the one that's going up against him, right? And if you're saying, okay, well, what if Biden was in charge and did all this? Fucking, he'd probably do the same or even
Well,
worse.
this is the great thing is it's happening in November, right? It's when the election
Yeah,
happens.
yeah,
That's coming soon. Like, it's coming really soon. And I don't know. There hasn't been much talk about American elections, I guess.
yeah.
Like other than from Trump, like you hear a lot about voter suppression stuff. But yeah, I'm really curious how that's gonna happen. What do you think about Trump's tweet about postponing the election?
I feel
That's
like he wants to do it because it's fucking advantageous to him, obviously, right?
obviously,
But
yeah. Like he's grasping for straws here.
but this is kind of in a position of weakness because you can kind of tell how kind of fucking boned he perceives himself to be and his campaign. I think I think they believe that they are not looking good, right?
Yeah, they don't think they're
And
as invincible as they were
and
before.
yeah, obviously in 2016 they thought this way too, but I mean like 2020 has
2016
the
was a little
hindsight.
different. They
20
were the
exactly.
underdog. They didn't think.
2020 has the hindsight of 2016. Like you're
Mhm.
taking into account that oh yeah, the polls obviously didn't reflect it, and this was like a completely black swan event, and something unexpected happened. So
Right.
in consideration of that, when they're looking at 2020 and they're like, could the same thing happen? The possibility is there, but there's a lot more stronger indicators, much stronger than 2016. That it's not
Yeah.
looking good for him. His own team thinks that way too, right? He himself probably thinks that way too.
What do you think of? There's
You can't.
a. Mhm.
Sorry, I'm just saying. I think all the Americans are saying just there's no way their laws and their constitution will allow a postponement in the election,
No, I don't think so. I think
so they have to
that's.
go forward with it anyways.
I mean, they should because they should have a clause that says, in these unperceivable events,
But you see, they're
we
scared. They're always scared of government, right? So they're always afraid that you put a clause in like that,
it would be
the government
abused.
will turn tyrannical because they would abuse it. They automatically always assume that the government
I mean, they're
is going
not
to turn like
wrong.
that.
They kind of do that, but the government technically uses that anyways. Like, if you make a rule, they're gonna find a way to abuse it anyways, right? So,
Kind of like if you make someone the enemy, they're gonna become the enemy, right? The American people are so scared of a tyrannical government that the
they
American
create
government
their
maybe
yeah.
they just like to do tyrannical things at that point. They'll grasp at whatever tyrannical thing they
You're
can do
you're
because they're so limited at this.
you're talking about self-fulfilling prophecy. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, self-fulfilling prophecy, sort of.
Yeah,
Yeah, along those lines, right?
yeah, it's true. I mean, it's like that in relationship too. Like, if you're in a relationship where you don't trust someone, and you're always like thinking that they're not worthy of trusting, you're gonna create that person because you're gonna cause actions where they're gonna feel like you don't trust them, and then they're gonna do things that you don't trust.
I don't think they'll just fucking turn around and do something. Well, not
Over
necessarily,
time.
but it would like an it would damage your ultimate aim in the relationship, which is what presumably to be with this person, right? You would
Yeah,
sabotage yourself into that.
you sabotage yourself. Yeah, exactly. There was also another theory that people talk about, The Simpsons predicting Trump being the president. Have you seen those?
Yeah, I've seen all of them.
Okay. You think that obviously they're just coincidence?
Yeah. Why would
Yeah,
The
because
Simpsons be the kingmaker of anything?
well, I think it's funny because people. Well, that's the conspiracy theory reasoning is that you cherry pick things. Like we talked about this before, but often
Yeah.
you always talk about the things that support your claim. You don't talk about the numerous things that don't. Right. So.
I'm gonna go out on. I'm gonna go off on a little tangent, but it's kind of relevant. I view that a lot of the older Chinese population in Canada, because I can only speak to Canada. I imagine this is the same in the States as well. They're like the most um, believing in a bunch of these fucking hoaxes and conspiracies and whatnot, and all the and all these like these special niche sort of like uh, hot takes and stuff. Like The Simpsons predicting that Trump would become like president and being the kingmaker, like you would find the same equivalents of ridiculous stories that get passed around on like WeChat or between like fucking like the boomer generation of
You're
the
talking about
Chinese
like the
people here.
horoscope predicting things,
Or
like
just like
the
article, they
Mayan
just share these
calendars.
weird articles about like, oh fucking, this is bad for you because they shared around a study. I think not. They shared around this article. It was a hoax article that was like, oh, a study came out from Stanford saying that if to prevent you from getting COVID, you gotta drink some boiled water and you gotta gurgle it and shit, so it can kill the virus in your throat or whatever. And they shared
Hmm.
it en masse, like without even fucking think. Like this is they believe in this stuff, right? And
Hmm.
then when World Health Organization or whoever, even like Stanford itself or whoever says like, yeah, no, that none of that is true. They're like, no,
Hmm.
no, no, that they're lying about that.
I feel like
The initial leak of the article that was definitely true.
this is kind of like the whole thing with anti-vaxxers and the one study that one guy did that proved that vaccine caused autism, and he was discredited and everything, and no
Yeah,
one
they
thought about
would. There's a quite sizable portion of people here. Like, I'm fucking generalizing, but I'm just kind of saying it in this maybe a sort of tongue-in-cheek way. But it seems like every fucking auntie and uncle of that age
it. Hmm.
seem to buy into this sort of stuff. The Asian boomer generation here buys into that stuff. A lot of them, like disproportionate amount, it seems.
Yeah, actually,
And,
all this talk about right and wrong and like politics and reminds me of the show I was watching on. It's called Business of Drugs, and it's all about the economy of drugs. And I thought it was interesting because there's like the economy of drugs is it's a little different than regular markets, but in some ways that there's a lot of the similarities. Like people do things based on incentives, right?
yeah,
And like they have different episodes. They have 6 episodes, and each of them is about different drugs. So they go from heroin, cocaine, MDA or MDMA, um, opioids,
isn't the main girl that hosts that program? She used to work for the CIA, right?
CIA. Yeah, yeah, that's what she said.
Obviously, this is a CIA work. Sorry, is a conspiracy flags are going up.
Possible. The one I love was the cocaine is obviously an easy one because I watched The Wire, so that was a good one.
I wonder what it, yeah, it would have been awkward in her position to be like, you know what? My agency had a strong hand in this.
In some sense, yeah, it's funny because like for example, MDMA, they were saying that the scientist who was looking into it or who created MDMA, he was looking at it as a therapy, for therapy, like
Yeah,
drug therapy, and then people have heard about his research, and then the government heard about it, and then it's like, oh, we gotta put a stop to it, and they made it. They classify it as a Schedule 1 drug. So Schedule 1 is like one of the highest schedule, like it's
yeah,
the most illegal substance. So then he couldn't stop. He had to stop researching, and then so by doing that, what happened is the drug was put as a recreational drug and then gone to the street level, right?
mm.
So rather than use for therapy, people just use it for raves or what's the kids call raves nowadays, like
Fucking yeah, just going out to fucking the clubs and shit.
yeah, the clubs and like music and stuff. What's the main music called? I forgot. There's a word for it. Anyways, yeah, they just take MDMA and stuff.
We're too
I thought
old.
that
We don't
was
know.
I thought that was interesting. Um,
Wait, she's okay. This is what
Oh,
I want to know.
EDM,
EDM, yeah.
yeah,
Okay, this is what
electronic
I'm
dance
interested in.
music.
She used to work for the CIA, and
Hmm.
I presumably they did an episode on fucking cocaine and all that stuff,
They
right?
did cocaine, yeah.
All right, how did they present that episode?
It was kind of like a documentary. They talk about um, the retail side, which is the drug dealers, how much they sell it for, things like that. And the reason that they do is because, like in a place like I guess from where they looked at, but it was a place where there is really no work and everyone is a drug dealer kind of thing. Um, they talked about the retailers, then they talked about the producers, like the farmers, right? And in like Colombia, cocaine is the only viable thing to grow, right? It's easier to grow and there's a buyer, you can sell it and you make money. Because if you try to grow
Jesus
other,
Christ. I feel like I
Mhm.
feel like they just fucking took a shit and sold it back to back to people with this show. I mean,
Do
like,
you think so?
cause the main, I mean, I think it's like a fucking open secret to everybody that the CIA was like was instrumental in fucking the entire flow of cocaine
Hmm.
from like the whole. Oh yeah, it came from Colombia and Pablo Escobar. Oh well, how did that all happen, right? And then
Hmm.
all of these like
So you're saying the CIA constructed that flow, the pipeline
they
from
had a
Colombia?
hand in that. They had an interest in a lot of that stuff too, and
They did mention,
it was in, and they used it as like a kind of like a revenue stream, or even as a tool to fight against like communist groups in South America.
yeah, because they did mention about, like, because Pablo was originally he was the first kingpin, right? And then
Yeah,
they got rid of him, but they said it was like a Hydra problem where you cut off one hand and many grew from
yeah.
it kind of thing. Yeah, so they were talking about Colombia, but the one word I thought was really good, uh, monopsony is like monopoly, but different. Instead of like monopoly is one seller, buyers, and monopsony is you have one buyer and many sellers.
Uh,
And what they were saying is that you had Colombia and you had all these farmers who were the sellers,
yeah.
and you had only one buyer, which was the Mexican drug cartel, because they're the one that transport it to US or
I
gets
feel
your product to market. Is what they were saying.
honestly, I feel like it's like it's so ridiculous a concept of this show because it's like imagine if like the CEO of McDonald's wanted to do a documentary about obesity in the United States, and then they get to
Hmm.
the part about fast food and he doesn't mention anything about like McDonald's or anything at all. And he just talks about, oh, this is very interesting. They're so curious why, like all these why
They did
obesity would be a
they did
problem in the
mention that
United
with
States.
they did mention that with opioids when they were trying to sell opioids to the doctors, that they create organizations that looked into opiates and how it was very effective and stuff, and they gave it a different name, but then by the people or the pharmacy that created opioids.
They
They
don't
were
even come close to it. You don't do if you
Mhm.
have you ever like read about like all that stuff that happened in like even like 50s onwards all the way to like the 2000s of all the
Mhm.
CIA involvement in South America and all those areas
Mhm.
and like the Iran Contra affair and FARC and all these things.
Mhm.
Fucking like it's basically my example where McDonald's or
Mhm.
just let's just say fast food in general,
Mhm.
like obviously big responsibilities and main cause of obesity. One of the main causes of obesity in the United
Mhm.
States, one of the drivers, making a
Mhm.
documentary about obesity and they want to make a show about it, but they never even mentioned their own involvement in it. And this is funny how the girl is fucking used to work for the CIA and there's no and she's obviously not going to talk about the fucking CIA's
She's not,
involvement in
yeah.
the entire drug trade around the world. Like it's not even like they're not like the drug dealers and shit, but there's a whole reason why this all these things happened, like Iran Contra deal, fucking Oliver North and all that shit.
Mhm.
They all had a hand in this. They all had an interest in 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 this flow, and it was all ostensibly in the name to combat communism, right?
Mhm.
That they feared in South America and around the world at that time. I mean, like it's funny that they're making a documentary on Netflix. The girl who used to work for the CIA, just no mention of the CIA in any of this. In all the drugs, in all the drug trades,
They
they detail in the episodes. There's
I
no
can't
mention of it
I
in
can't
here.
recollect that they mentioned it, but I
Of
mean,
course,
there's
then
a
that
lot
they've
of.
done their job. Then, right? If you don't know, if you watch the entire documentary, you can't even, and you don't know about it. Then that fucking they've done it.
But I mean, they do color stories that are similar to what you're talking about, CIA involvement. One thing I thought was interesting, like they talk about Murmur. I think it's like a country in the East, Southeast Asia,
Myanmar,
and or
Burma,
Myanmar, I think.
yeah.
Eh,
Myanmar, right?
Myanmar, yeah. And they're talking about like what was
Myanmar.
it? Well, the drug was methamphetamine, and how they make these pill forms. And you had these farmers who were growing opioids, I guess, or poppies, and they're trying to sell it, and then they would get paid partial in cash and partial in meth, and
Yep.
then they become dealers themselves because they can't feed their kids, so
Jesus
they would have to
Christ.
sell meth to make money. And I thought that was a really interesting way how you can integrate people into a system that they didn't want to be in. And I thought that was like
Myanmar
interesting.
is another one. Myanmar was another one that's directly linked from
Are you talking
even
about with the CIA involved?
yeah, it's not only CIA,
Uh,
the entire State Department. Like Myanmar is a special case, especially because it borders with China. And what happened in
yes.
the end of the Chinese Civil War, you know that the Kuomintang lost, right? Like the nationalists lost, and they had to basically the bulk of them had to retreat to Taiwan, right?
Hmm.
Well, in the southwestern province of Yunnan, the nationalist detachment that was there, when they got fucking owned by the communists, they retreated into those places like Myanmar and Thailand
Hmm.
and Vietnam. Well, more so Myanmar, Burma, as it was known back then, and Thailand, right?
Hmm.
So then the plan after that, and there was a lot of American involvement in this too, was they wanted these soldiers and these people that fled with the nationalists to keep on fighting the communists and continue to harass them. So they're trying to conduct their own guerrilla warfare against the communists in the southwestern region. It's thick with jungles, a lot of mountains. It's perfect condition for that kind of warfare.
Hmm.
Well,
Also,
they had to try to find a way to fund these people and to provide arms for them. And one of the ways for them to do it was the old Kuomintang soldiers that fled across. They got directly into the opium trade, so they would.
yes.
They're the arms and they're the muscle in the area. So then basically the CIA got them to basically strong arm whatever local producers or whatever or farmers that had land in that area to basically take control of the manufacture and the processing of
They
opium
did.
in those areas.
They did painted that with the memoir because the military memoir they said that they were able to buy all these military because they sold meth.
The whole golden triangle of Asia, it kind of came from there. Like opium, it was already
Hmm.
grown over there, but the fight, their mobilization of these like remnant soldiers are, and also the anti-communist populations to fight against communism, they
Hmm.
mobilized. They kind of got these people to come together, work as like an actual functioning production unit. So that you can see the production of opium just fucking skyrocketed in like that Golden Triangle area, right? And then and that was directly from the cause of the CIA and outfits like that as well. You know, to try to get fucking to sell drugs for arms to fight communists in that area. So that all this entire problem that you see even right now to the current day, where you have fucking drug is such a big drugs fucking problem in there, where it's
Hmm.
like producing and the roots and people getting killed and all that stuff. It all stems from fucking that. This is like leftover from that mess that they created. And I like it that they make the new and improved like slick documentaries to try to fucking explain the drug deal, and they completely omit that they're probably the ones that had the biggest hand in doing this stuff.
So one theme I noticed that they talk about is when you make things illegal, you almost promote it. Like, you know what I mean? Like the drug issue seems to be a lot of it is because it is illegal, like cocaine being illegal or MDMA and stuff like that.
Yeah,
That you create these black markets, that you create these incentives for people to. It's like if cocaine was legal, right? You would just put out the Mexican drug cartel out of business because then all the farmers in Colombia could just sell legally to US, and then you wouldn't have big of an issue,
I
right?
don't. Yeah. Okay. Um. Here's my thoughts on this. All right. Like
Mm-hmm.
when people say it like this, and obviously you're right. One of the ways that the American society and indeed fucking capitalism is structured is that
Mm-hmm.
this is their double-edged sword. Fucking if people want to fucking buy drugs, it's almost impossible to stop them from buying drugs.
Yeah,
And
because you have
fucking
a capitalist
the
society.
consumption of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying this doesn't happen in other countries, in other kind of systems too, but it's capitalism gets like a bonus towards it, right? You get a
Mm-hmm.
bonus buff for people consuming drugs because it's ingrained into the way the system operates, right? In that context, when people say, "Oh fuck," they don't see a solution on how to stop this, aside from like maybe legalizing is one of the ways that where
Because
they can think of
legalizing
it.
is the reason the solution, or the
It's
reason you need a solution
well,
is because the problem was created by making it illegal in the first
Yeah,
place.
well, yeah. In that case, yeah, you can. There may be some merit into it, right? And it depends on how you do it, but there may be some merit into it, right? Oh, fucking,
Mm-hmm.
they have to. If we can't stop them from buying it anyways, might as well just make it legal and regulate, right? Whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly. Just regular.
the some of the things where it's not really an issue, but it's kind of like I kind of like have a fucking I have like a shit eating like fucking I don't even know what it called a grin or
Mm-hmm.
a snicker or whatever. like
Mm-hmm.
whenever I hear that because that's only you're only looking at one system and you're assuming that's the only way to do it, and a lot of people always view it as that's the only way to do it. But
Mm-hmm.
I just mentioned about the whole Golden Triangle thing in Asia, where drug production went up and heroin and right,
Mm-hmm.
and that got pretty much exported throughout the entire world. Well, before then, there's the one exception towards that. A big exception was China during that period, where drug consumption completely plummeted, right? And that's after the Civil War, whatever years like that. And you would think that, oh, with this massive added production of drugs, especially opium from Myanmar and Thailand, right, the northern areas, the rural jungle areas, you would think that even it would be even more, but the opposite happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the whole being was like when the People's Republic of China was my wife was looking in on me like a stalker.
She's just
When it was
checking where.
established, China had a really big problem with heroin, right? Like before, already during the end of the Qing Dynasty, all through and also all throughout the Republican period, they pretty much like half the population, a big part of it, you could say was had an opium problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether you were rich or whether you were poor, you spent money to get opium and shit. You know, thanks to the British back then. Like hundreds of years, maybe like
Yeah,
150 years ago,
I
whatever,
remember that. Yeah,
for the Opium War, right? The British, the biggest
the
drug
British.
dealers, more bigger than Pablo Escobar could ever hope to be. But that was always the problem, right? The Republican period was one of the main tenets was, oh, we gotta get people off opium. They fucking failed. When the communists came in power, they're like, okay, we gotta get people off opium, but they succeeded, right? And nobody fucking over here ever wants to talk about it. They completely got the entire country to go cold turkey and got the consumption of opium to plummet. Basically, within one period of time, everybody you went from like half the country always getting high and addicted to opium to basically like single digits at that point, right? And it was just this entire mass program was like it doesn't matter like if you're a dealer you're gonna get executed, right? So a lot of them fled to Hong Kong and Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, whatever, all these other countries where they would get executed if you were big drug dealers and stuff. If you're a small time, like on the street and stuff, or if you were consuming it, what you got was basically you just got sent to the rehabilitation program, right? And that was just you in an area where they feed you and you sleep in. All you have to do is just be in there stone cold turkey without opium for whatever extended periods of time. And they try, like they would fucking administer like the medicine to you if they felt like you're gonna die or something. Entire country forcefully went cold turkey. Opium problem that plagued the country for like maybe 150 years, gone. overnight. And massive amounts of supply from the Golden Triangle that should have correlated to even more cheaper opium and more opium production, opium consumption in China itself did not occur. It occurred everywhere else in the world, but didn't occur in China. So there
So
is a
you
way to do it, but you gotta have the fucking balls in the system
it's
and
that
the
is
whole
that possible
historical.
nowadays? Like,
It's not possible in America because the historical conditions are not there. But that's different to say that, oh, this is the only way. It's not the only way, right? And if you can
well,
think of a
maybe it's
way,
the only way for America, which is also not really a way.
okay, there's two ways of saying this, right? Like I
Hmm.
obviously I would be like, yeah, couldn't exactly apply this to America because it's completely different historical conditions, right? But that's not to say that it's impossible, and that's what you're saying if you're saying, oh, this is the only way. Legalization is the only way, right?
I think
And I
the
agree.
reason people say is not maybe I wouldn't say yeah it's the only way, but I would say the way that they're doing it now isn't working, and that
Yeah,
maybe a radical way would be more something to consider.
it would. It's convincing. Like I don't think America would be able to do a mass rehabilitation program. The country's not built for it, and the population would
No,
absolutely not accept it. They're not even ready for something like that, right?
well,
But
hmm
that's not to say that if you're let's just say you're another country that have those conditions that are more closely to where you could implement that is something that exists and it happened in history before. I don't like it where I just don't like it if people just completely black out that part of history, right? To not even have it on the record, to be like, this has happened before. Like obviously you can't implement that in America, and everybody, most people, including me, would agree. Like, yeah, that's probably you can't implement it in America, but that's not to say that this other way doesn't exist. Like this does exist. It's on the fucking record, but people just fucking they either don't know about it or they choose not to even talk about it.
the other thing I thought was hilarious. Well, not maybe hilarious, but tragic is when they talk about the opioid pandemic, where farmer doctors were giving opiates to their patients, and then they become addicted,
Yeah,
and then they become addicts, and then they start buying more, but then the price of opiates becomes too expensive, and they can't keep up with their addiction, and then they turn to heroin because heroin is the same,
well,
chemically the
that was
same
the
as
thing
opiate.
with fentanyl too, right? The fentanyl was more stronger
Yeah,
than.
yeah, and then they bought heroin, and then people didn't want pure heroin; they want heroin spiked with fentanyl, right? But heroin was still a cheaper thing. So then people who, what I'm trying to say is how a drug dealer is born or a drug addict was born is that they become an addict of something else, say, their medication, and then they turn to heroin because of financial reason. I thought that was an interesting origin story, you could say.
I I'm still hung up on it. Like I just don't like it when America's the people that try to come up with these thoughts. They only focus
Mhm.
on their own
Well, I think
specific
legalization, a lot of that
experience with
comes
it.
from Europe, right? Because if you look at other European countries, they don't seem to have a drug problem because a lot of it is legal, right? Like say marijuana, right?
Yeah,
So
I mean
and
but that's one way that exists out there, right? And
yeah,
like when they they can't fucking solve the drug problem because it's just that maybe you can argue that's one of the problems. They're just too they're too narrowly focused on this small window of of ways and understanding. But whatever. And also, like, you know what? I don't think they're really that serious about it. They fucking I don't like I don't give a shit about them anyways. Like if they want to legalize it, they legalize it. Fucking make it everybody. Everybody can get fucking high on the street. I don't care, right?
I mean, U.S.
Do
does
whatever
have
they want. I mean, yeah, do whatever the fuck they want. As long as my whole thing is as long as me, myself, everyone I know, and my friends, and as long as our lives are getting better, fine. And ideally, as long as everybody else, his life is getting better at the same time, is fine. Well, what can I do about it? If they want to have a fucking drug war and they want to have Mexico descend into like a warlord narco state and shit, go ahead. What the fuck can I do about it? But they shouldn't say they don't say fucking. I don't want them to fucking say like, oh well, just because like we're American, this is everything that we came up with, just fucking sucks. So I guess that's the end of it. That's the only way we can handle it because what that's it. Fucking that's not really true, but. Uh,
Yeah. The other way that was proposed was the doctor I was talking about, David Eagleman. He also talked about what if you can train, like if you can't stop the supply, what if we stop the demand? And what if you train people to resist, like
yeah.
being
Good luck
addicts?
with
And
that. Fucking.
what that was a study he did. He found that like he would have addicts go through an MRI machine,
Uh,
and he would show pictures, just random pictures, and then whenever it shows pictures of them getting high, like needles going into their veins and stuff, you would see this huge spike of dopamine, right? And their urges, kind of thing, right? And what he found is that, like, what he told them is like they had this real time graph and they showed the level of dopamine, and they would tell them like, okay, whenever you see this start spiking, I need you to focus on it and try to lower it, right? And he didn't tell them how to lower it, but he just told them just do what you can to lower it. And the patients were able to. I don't know what they think of, but they try to think of things to control their urges, right? And so basically, what the doctor was training them is that when people or these addicts, when they get released from prison, they're gonna go back to the drug dealers, right?
yeah.
So what he's trying to teach these people is that give them the tools to resist, right?
Okay.
Resist the urge of addiction and stuff. So
What do you
that,
think about it? I want to hear your thoughts about this and the whole legalization thing.
well, I think, yeah, I think decriminalizing, like legalization and decriminalizing are two different things. But I think maybe decriminalizing might be a step forward. Like
Everything, right?
I do think, well, maybe it's hard to say. Yeah, radically might be everything, but it might be too much change. But I think Canada did a good thing with cannabis, because cannabis, um, people say, a lot of researchers say that there is a lot of medical benefits with cannabis, and that because we made it illegal, we couldn't do research on them because we don't really know what, we don't really
Yeah.
know too much about
I think
cannabis
I think
because
the
we couldn't research
majority of
it.
people, especially in Canada, would be like, yeah, you know what, cannabis, like fucking marijuana is not a big deal. So, yeah, no, I don't think
Mm-hmm.
anybody was. Not too many people would get too hung up about. There's still gonna be the old fogey or whoever that is opposed
Yeah,
to it, of
like the
course.
other one, I would think would be easy would be MDMA. I do think that one has a lot of research
But from
behind
what I
being.
get from you is there are some drugs that you think there shouldn't be,
Yeah, I do think opioids and heroin, um, they should be legal in a sense for medical use. Like,
which they are already.
yeah, because
Just not recreational,
yeah,
obviously.
they shouldn't have been recreational. Um,
But it's not
like
like the whole problem is they were never supposed to be recreational drugs. People
what the
just get their
other,
hands on
yeah,
them
they were never
illegally.
supposed to be. Because the other issue too is that I guess for some reason doctors thought, or maybe not doctors, but people thought that because the heroin was supposed to be a painkiller,
Yeah,
but they didn't want it to be addictive. That's the miracle drug they're looking for, right? Can we find a painkiller that
yeah,
is effective, but then also don't get people addicted to it? And I don't know if there's I don't think
yeah. But they over
exactly,
prescribed base for it, and it was almost like a go-to like prescription. There you go. You feel pain, just take more of the
exactly.
fucking painkillers, and eventually people want to upgrade to hair. But the problem still persists now. Like there's a big
There's a
opioid
big.
problem. There's a big fentanyl
Mhm.
problem, and and like you said, there's a proponents of legalization that says, you know what, just legalize all the drugs, and that will get rid of
No, I don't.
that'll
Well,
get rid of the
maybe the
like the cartel
cocaine
problem on
part.
this
I
side.
think cocaine is where legalizing would help it the most. I think the heroin, the opioid, it's a different. I think that's a demand issue.
Right.
You need to correct the demand because, yeah, you need to tell people to figure out how to treat pain better. I think
Because
the. Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I would agree with you because I look at the historical precedent, and when China was under like fucking getting owned by heroin, at that
Mhm.
point the drug was basically in all intents and purposes, you could just buy it, whatever. And even the authorities would fucking be that were supposed to catch you were getting high on that shit, right? In all effects and purposes, it was much more legal than legalization ever could be, and right. And then that country was wrecked by it, right? Like it was, it was like you got half their population just fucking just strung up on opium the whole time.
The
You couldn't do
mhm.
anything. Like it wasn't just you couldn't you almost didn't have a country anymore. So when they had
What
to deal
about
at that point when
there's
they dealt with
mhm.
it, they felt like okay, this is a serious fucking problem. Two revolutions later, and it's still a problem. Yeah, like they're like no, you know what? They wouldn't have gone for hey, let's just rubber stamp this and make this legal. They thought about we need to get rid of this, and that's kind of how they got rid of it. And I'm thinking, well, okay, so on the other end of the spectrum, like we said earlier, legalization is one of the solutions put forward. But you and
Mhm.
I both agree that a drug like heroin or any of the opioid drugs, you can't
That's not
really
gonna fix it.
you can't you can't just allow it to be legalized if it doesn't fix anything. So what
You might there might be a vaccine way where you create a vaccine where it interferes with your dopamine receptors. So
so what
things
you're
like
gonna give the
heroin,
vaccine to the entire fucking population then
yeah.
to immunize them
So
against
basically the idea is so that heroin and opioid doesn't give you that dopamine high, like because it interferes with your dopamine receptors, and so in a way that they're not
what if
effective.
what if you just what if naturally if you can't get a dopamine high naturally anymore wouldn't people just be miserable?
Well, that's what the thing is. Yeah, we produce our own dopamine through things like sex or like
Yeah, what happens if you
finishing your
just
homework.
fucking
But those
basically
things, but those
lobotomize
are
everybody?
what we consider. I'm not saying we're going to get rid of our dopamine receptors. What I'm trying to say is you interfere it to so it doesn't get to that level of high. You know what I mean? Because the issue with dopamine is when you experience such a high that you can't create naturally, your brain thirsts for it, right?
Yeah, but if you administered a vaccine, wouldn't it prevent you from getting the dopamine
No,
highs
no, I'm not.
anymore?
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to clarify that it's not to get rid of dopamine receptor completely. It's to interfere with it so that you can't reach the level of natural dopamine levels. You know what I mean? Like it prevents it so that when it goes past that threshold, it's not going to do anything.
I feel like this would be more of a wonder vaccine because it sounds very hard for people to calibrate it to that specific.
Well, they
First of
obviously
all, just
haven't.
like the technical
Mm-hmm,
consideration of trying to calibrate this so it doesn't. It's only meant to affect like the on this fucked up high that you get from heroin and
mm-hmm,
not the natural dopamine high. And
mm-hmm.
like that is by itself seems like a minefield to try to calibrate. And then on top of that, like the political, societal, and ethical considerations in the population and trying to
Well,
administer something like
it's
this.
yeah. I
It
don't
seems
know.
like a complete fucking science fiction sort of deal.
Yeah. At this point, it is science fiction. But those are some of the ideas that they're throwing out there.
It sort of seems like kind of an overkill way to kind of deal with it too, because people can say, "Oh, how can we deal with the cocaine problem?" Well, why don't we just kill all everybody? Then they can't be high on cocaine anymore.
Well, it's not like that. It's almost like let's just get rid of noses so people can't
Yeah,
snort
let's
it.
get rid of noses against sorted, and also fucking cutting off the nose to spite the face. In this case, cutting off the nose to spite the entire population.
It's yeah. But again, it's kind of like beyond. Let's just legalize. It's just different solutions, and they're all difficult in their own ways. Some
So,
with
so
more
for
fantasy than
me,
others.
just from this conversation,
Hmm.
if I take our positions to their logical conclusions, it looks like for me the only way that the Americans would be able to stop the fentanyl problem would be like a national program of fucking opioid rehabilitation.
Yeah, they do. They would have to, and hopefully, the people who started it is the one that pays for it. But they likely won't be.
And knowing America in its current state, I don't. They would never fucking go for something like this. So it's just gonna be there forever. The more the country collapses, the more people are just gonna
Well,
fucking be strung up on fentanyl, anyways.
it's a new industry now, right? There are states that never had a drug problem and now are one of the biggest drug problems. There's a market for it now, so people are getting rich off of selling opioids.
Yeah, and yeah, people fucking rather take it just to escape and get high rather than deal with their shitty lives that they have
Well,
no control over.
if you're in their position, you can't blame them.
I can't blame them. That's a whole. I don't blame. Like, you know, like the very popular right wing position in the U.S. would
Mm-hmm.
be, you know, and equally I criticize like the U.S. version of left wing position, which is, I don't know, fucking legalize everything. Like we just kind of said, you can't really do that with
Mm-hmm.
fentanyl. But the right wing position was always these fucking druggies. It's their fault. Like the whole lot of them in aggregate,
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
maybe anecdotal one, not like individual one, but the whole group of them. It's their fault because they chose to get high and stuff.
They chose to get high. Yeah.
The review is that's a choice. That was they were presented with a fair choice in the marketplace of life, and they chose to take drugs. Like it was like a boutique decision. Like, oh
That's
well,
that's a
you know.
really weird. Oh, that's a wrong assumption to think life is fair. First of
But
all.
this is widespread. Like people actually believe. There's a whole bunch of people. There's a whole discipline of politics in that country that believes in this. In ours too, in Canada as well. You'll get people that'll be like, you know what, there's their own fucking goddamn fault. Like everybody, the entire city of Baltimore is on fucking fentanyl. The entire fentanyl there's a whole fentanyl problem in one city. It's their own fucking goddamn fault.
I think
They
Ohio
never
was
made
right.
anything of themselves. That's what they'll say.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like, okay, so you can imagine how far you'll get, you know, to even come close to fix this problem when you have a substantial portion of the population that does think this way.
Yep. Well, anyways, we should wrap it up.
All right, shall we whack? Yeah, let's do it. Any last thoughts before we end this?
Um, I don't know.
Wow, we went on a big.
People who live in the U.S., please vote, even though your vote likely not get mailed in because the postal service will be running behind.
People in the U.S., you're fucked. Godspeed to you.
It is interesting because, like, what if you are concerned about COVID and you're going to realize that, hey, if I do my mail-in ballot, it's not going to work because, you know, the mailing system is going to be backlogged and they're not going to
I don't
count my
even
vote.
care about all that. That's such a you know where I stand on all this. This vote doesn't even matter. So ergo, mail-in ballots don't even matter. So
But you still
matters.
support. Yeah, sure. Okay, fine. Even if your vote don't matter, you do support people voting though, right?
I don't care. Honestly, I would be like, you know what, this doesn't matter. Why? Even if I supported them voting, what does it change? Nothing. Their choice, even especially if their choices between a Democratic and Republican Party that is the same, and then the candidates are basically fucking, they're just both useless anyways. Like why?
Yeah.
Why does it even matter? I wouldn't. If someone asked me, maybe this will be the last rant to end on. Someone asked me, "Oh yeah, you don't think it's important to vote?" I'd be like, "No, especially in that
I
context, it
see.
doesn't fucking matter."
I feel like
Like,
it's the whole Bernie thing. It's like if Bernie's not going to be there, I'm not going to vote.
well, even when Bernie was in there, people would have to reconcile the fact that in this political system, if you voted Bernie in, how would he realistically change all these things? And most of the people, especially the socialist leanings of people over there, that kind of piggybacked on Bernie because he's probably the most left person you're gonna get there. They're kind of thinking that too. They're like, yeah, okay, well, fuck. They were having conflicts within themselves. We're like, why would you vote for Bernie when it's not gonna matter? And some people were like, well, you
It's
gotta vote for
a
something, blah blah blah.
it's a
And
step
Bernie's
towards
supposed to,
change, I would say. I guess you
yeah.
could argue.
And obviously they all got soaked, right? Fucking egg on
Yeah.
their face. So in
Yeah.
the end, the
No
guys that
change.
said that there's not gonna be any change, they were proven right. They were fucking right. The people that were having hope for it, they were wrong. And obviously it's even more apparent that it doesn't even matter.
To sum up, you say U.S. has no hope. There's no point.
Not in this current way. They're heading towards fucking collapse and whatever comes from that.
So you're just waiting for that collapse to happen.
Yeah, hold on. I gotta
Okay.
fix this fucking thing. Craig looked
Well,
like it's crapped out on us.
we could just have this as an abrupt ending.
Now recording.
We could just have an abrupt ending where Craig just leaves.
No, that's too awkward. Because in the end, I guess still gotta revert to OBS to try to
It'll be
end
meta.
the podcast. It's not meta enough. People will just think, "What is this shit product?" He just uploaded something that's incomplete for the 20 people that actually listen to this.
I'm sure the brand, our brand is shit product. I mean, we're basically
Garbage.
our title is garbage. So
All right, Well, I just have one more thing that I wanted to kind of reminisce / rant about. That has to do with the elections and voting and stuff. Before we wrap up this garbage episode of this garbage podcast, which is I remember back then, and I think it was a Facebook comment, but this is years back, and it was for a Canadian election, where there was one girl that was on my Facebook contact list for. She made a post where it was like, I'm sick and tired of people that say stuff like, "Oh, I'm not gonna vote," or "My vote doesn't matter," or have any problems with the results of an election if you didn't vote. Something like, and it was like the regular stuff, like, "Oh, it's your civic duty. It's your duty as a citizen. You gotta vote. Like you basically vote. You have to vote, or basically shut up." Basically, and I thought about it, like these people are kind of like the fucking problems of the world, because there's a fucking problem because these assholes are the ones that are saying like, "Hey, fucking, this is the way to do it. This way that doesn't work at all." And especially when you get to a point where it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't work at all. And then they say it in a way like anything else, any kind of critique or, like of this system is not allowed if you don't engage in this worthless act of just fucking basically show mimicry. If you don't engage in this, you're not doing whatever civic duty, your role in fucking management of the country, and all that. Like basically pinning all the blames on you, like you as the individual voter, instead of what is clearly, like this system, this amalgamation of all these different fucking values and everything aligned with this overriding mode of production that necessarily has to alienate and also like it has to chew out a bunch of people, right, to generate surplus. It necessarily has to do this, but this asshole thinks that, oh, fucking, this your fucking fault because you didn't vote, right? Like, if the choice was between a shit sandwich and a fucking diarrhea, a mug of diarrhea.
In South Park, it's a douche.
If between a shit sandwich and a fucking douche, because you don't want to make that choice and you abstain from that, knowing that that does nothing for you except that you just ingest a lot of shit, you're to blame of that. And I feel like these people are the fucking worst. They're the ones that are so like, they're cheerleading a fucking thing that's a ship that's going down into the water. They're on the Titanic and they're fucking blaming all the passengers that the ship is sinking. And they're saying, yeah, fucking, there's not enough life jackets. Well, fuck you for being born and coming on this ride then. And
I do think the one way to satisfy both parties, like you and her, would be to vote and then pick a target where it just says, I abstain from voting, or I don't like any of these choices.
Why would, like, it does nothing. That would not be in between both of us. It wouldn't.
What that does is that, one, you vote, and two, you actually record the displeasurement of the people.
That's just fucking mimicry anyways. Like, what's the point? The whole, right?
Well,
like, what does it really satisfy?
Because you show the record, like, hey, for the record, there's a 50 population.
What does it matter if you're on the record or not? If it doesn't do anything, if your choices are shit, and what does it matter which one you voted? Like, it actually means anything.
I think data means stuff, and when it's recorded data, it's more meaningful than if someone just tweeted.
All right, I'm gonna give you an example, and I'm gonna take it to the extreme because, or else the elements are not apparent, right?
Hmm.
Let's just say it's 1945. No, yeah, you know what? 1945, 47, whenever the election was that they held in Republican China, right? And the choice on the ballot was the guy from the Kuomintang or the guy that's just some random guy that they picked up. So you're saying that it mattered that you needed to vote because at least it would be it would satisfy that need that it would be on the record and you actually did something. You needed to participate in that vote,
Hmm.
right? What? And you're saying that this would be beneficial. How would this even change anything in the end?
I think it would send a message to tell them that the system is not working.
But it didn't.
It
didn't.
Because
In the end, they got overthrown.
By not voting, you're not changing anything anyways, right?
Well, no, that's wrong. The people that didn't vote, they actually did the change. They overthrew them.
Okay, so you're saying that the U.S. you're just gonna have people who through Biden and Trump.
You know what? I have my my answer that I would like to say, and the answer that I would endorse. And the answer I'd like to say is fuck yeah, let's let them just overthrow them. That's the answer I'd like to say. The answer I would endorse would be like, you know what? Like you want to have, if you want to affect change, you want to do this as something that actually does the change. It doesn't have to be like the fucking overthrow of the government, but you can't say that this meaningless act of voting substitutes for that change. You can't equate it like that. And in equating it, you're taking out like the actual avenue. Well, you're denying that there is anything else that it kind of exists within this paradigm. If you live your life already knowing that you don't have to wake up eating a shit sandwich every day, right? Eating feces is not part of your daily diet, right? So it's also the same thing when it comes to politics. This fucking illusion of choice is that it's an illusion. Mm-hmm. This vote and stuff is one avenue of showing your whatever your say
complicity.
No, not.
Oh.
It's one way of showing your whatever political activism, whatever, but it's not the only way, and especially when it becomes useless to the point where it's just well, what do you call it when the limbs don't work anymore? Fucking
phantom limbs?
No, like it's whatever.
Paralyzed?
The word escapes me, but it just becomes useless because you haven't used it enough, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It can be. It's the same concept. If this mechanism doesn't work anymore, or it's been even co-opted, and it's not even meant to work the way it was supposed to work, or even yet like this is a false choice that's presented to you. It's no longer anything worthwhile of anything. So then to tell people that, hey, like at least get your name on the record. Why? There's no point. The whole point is there is avenues of change out there. Like the central fact of government and system in the world is if the mass of people show, like, you can't have a government that completely goes against the will of people to the point where they have a mass uprising. Like the masses answer back, right? At the end of the day, you still have to govern over people. Your army is filled, their ranks are filled with people from the population. If the population of the people are against you, and they make it known in action, you can't fucking survive that way. Like as leader, you can't stay perpetually as leader. That's what people don't get about fucking dictators and stuff, right? That being said, if you're saying that the choice is only, you can only vote or you can shut up, that's a false fucking choice. That's already a false fucking choice. That's not even a choice. That's basically a lie. Because the true fact of the matter is, in the dynamics of governance and people and country and all that jazz, if the vote fails and it is no longer an able mechanism of anything like it was in fucking all these other countries, but the example I put was like the post 1945 Republican China, where it just there's nothing anymore. Like there's ways that they can change it, and in China's way, they got pushed towards fucking revolution. You don't necessarily have to go for revolution, but you don't have to only feel there is only the vote is the only way. And that's probably my end rant on this. Like, if people are thinking that they've gotten to a ridiculous choice in the U.S. because their only choice is Democratic or Republican, Joe Biden or Trump, I think people are realizing that they're hitting a dead end with this voting thing.
Yeah.
And God help America if they keep on thinking, or like that girl that made that Facebook comment years ago, where it's like, vote or shut up. If they still think that is the way to keep going, people like her are probably going to be the reason if it does descend into violent revolution. That'll be why, because people kept on telling people you have to either vote or shut up. Well, they kept on voting, and then nothing fucking mattered until the very end, where people couldn't fucking take it anymore.
What we need is a sponsor for pitchforks, because what we're advocating is purchase your pitchforks.
You could force the government. There's ways to basically get a government to kind of like bend to the will of the people, and it doesn't
Like
need to
tweets,
go to overthrow. No,
viral
it doesn't
videos.
need to go to overthrow, but very often overthrow is the last means, because every other means was exhausted, and it gets exhausted even faster and even more if you have people that are saying, hey, fucking, if you don't vote, shut up. And that's why I fucking despise those people, because they don't fucking understand this whole dynamic of this whole thing, and they basically just, it's a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, and that's I guess we kept it on theme this entire episode. These people have a little bit of knowledge, and that's a dangerous thing, because what they say and what they're forcing people, what they want to fucking accuse people of doing, it'll end up in a very dangerous state, and that's where I will end this rant at.
Well, on that note, thank you for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, as you always do.
And there's people in America, if you don't vote, don't listen to that bitch. Find another way.
Hopefully Jason will be on the next one so he could get his job back.
Yeah. Hopefully, whatever happens, everybody doesn't end up eating each other. That's the bar I set at.
Yeah, cannibalism.
Yeah. As long as it doesn't descend into cannibalism, everybody's happy. Anyways.
All right. Good night.
All right. Good night. Take care.
All right. I need to